There's something almost poetic about the fact that one of the most successful adult animated shows in television history began as a deliberate attempt to irritate copyright lawyers. Let's go back to 2006. A young animator named Justin Roiland had been working on a television series he found creatively suffocating, and after getting fired, he decided to channel all of that frustration into something completely unhinged. He was submitting short films to a festival called Channel 101, a nonprofit monthly showcase in Los Angeles that was co-founded by a writer named Dan Harmon. The festival worked simply. You submitted a short film in pilot format, a live audience voted on it, and if people liked it, you got to keep making episodes. If they didn't, you were done. Simple, brutal, honest. Secret number one. The show Rick and Morty did not begin as Rick and Morty. It began as a grotesque short film called The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty, which was a deliberately crude parody of the characters Doc Brown and Marty McFly from the Back to the Future films. Roiland made it specifically to provoke intellectual property attorneys. The humor was extremely vulgar, the animation was rough, and the characters bore an obvious resemblance to beloved film icons. It was, by any conventional measure, a bad idea, and yet something about the energy of it, the unfiltered chaos of an older genius dragging a nervous young boy into danger, contained the embryo of something genuinely original. Secret number two. Dan Harmon, who would later become the co-creator of the show, met Justin Roiland specifically through Channel 101. So Harmon had co-founded the festival, and he developed a strange affection for Roiland's particular brand of humor, which he has described as a sensibility that just came in and blew everyone's mind. The two began collaborating, and their friendship grew out of a shared love for animation and a shared tendency towards self-destruction in creative spaces. Secret number three. In 2012, Adult Swim approached Dan Harmon and asked him to create an animated series for their network. Harmon had recently been fired from his own show Community, a critically beloved but ratings-challenged NBC sitcom, and he was looking for a new direction. He approached Roiland, and together they proposed adapting the spirit of that crude Doc and Marty short into something more fully realized. The characters were redesigned and renamed. Doctor. Emmett Brown and Marty McFly became Rick Sanchez and Morty Smith. The show premiered on December 2nd, 2013. Secret number four. Adult Swim initially had reservations about Roiland voicing both lead characters. It is genuinely unusual for a single actor to carry the vocal weight of two primary characters who speak with each other in nearly every scene. The network pushed back, concerned it would sound strange or monotonous. Roiland pushed back harder, insisting he could differentiate the two voices in a meaningful way. He won the argument, and for the first 6 seasons of the show, every conversation between Rick and Morty was essentially Justin Roiland, talking to himself, responding to himself, and finding emotional truth in that exchange with remarkable consistency. Secret number five. The Rick and Morty theme music has a stranger origin than almost anyone realizes. That memorable melody, the one that sounds like a distant cousin of the classic Doctor Who theme, was not composed for Rick and Morty at all. It was written by a composer named Ryan Elder for a completely different project. Roiland had been developing a Cartoon Network pilot called Dog World, which was about a civilization of intelligent dogs who had enslaved humanity. The theme was composed for that show, which was ultimately rejected. When Dog World fell apart, Roiland shifted his focus to Rick and Morty and simply brought the music with him. It has been the theme of Rick and Morty since day one, and most people have no idea it was originally designed for a show about sentient dogs. Secret number six. Several elements of Dog World were recycled directly into Rick and Morty. If you watch the second episode of the series, Lawnmower Dog, you will notice that a significant portion of the plot involves Morty's dog, Snuffles, gaining superintelligence through a device Rick builds and eventually leading a canine uprising. This is almost certainly not a coincidence. Roiland essentially dissolved Dog World into the Rick and Morty universe, preserving ideas he had already developed rather than abandoning them entirely. Secret number seven. Dan Harmon is famous in television writing circles for developing something he calls the story circle, a narrative structure he derived from studying mythologist Joseph Campbell and the works of Carl Jung. The story circle is a simple 8-step framework. A character is in a zone of comfort. They want something. They enter an unfamiliar situation. They adapt to it, they get what they wanted, they pay a heavy price for it. They return to their familiar situation, and they have changed. Harmon uses this circle in some form for almost every episode of Rick and Morty he has written. There is actually an episode in Season 4, Never Rick and Morty, where the story circle becomes a literal object within the narrative, a train that Rick and Morty are trapped on, running in endless circles through unfinished stories. Harmon is essentially making fun of his own method while using it. Secret number 8. The show has been described by Dan Harmon himself as a cross between The Simpsons and Futurama. He has said the formula involves balancing domestic family drama against wild science fiction adventures. In practice, what this means is that the family scenes ground the show emotionally, while the sci-fi adventures give it scope. But the DNA of both shows is present in ways that go beyond that description. The visual design of the show, particularly the backgrounds and the way alien planets are depicted, owes a clear debt to Futurama. The family dynamics, particularly the relationship between a well-meaning but chaotic patriarch figure and a frustrated, intelligent woman, echo The Simpsons in ways the creators have acknowledged openly. Secret number 9. Justin Roiland's influences for Rick's character specifically include an obscure comedian named Foster Brooks, who became famous in the 1970s for performing an entire comedy persona as a lovable, functional drunk. Rick's tendency to slur his words and burp mid-sentence, which feels like a natural character trait, is actually partly modeled on this specific comedic tradition. The burping itself became a defining feature that audiences immediately associated with the character, to the point that when the show recast the voice of Rick in its 7th season, the reduced frequency of in-character burping became one of the most commonly noted differences among longtime fans. Secret number 10. The show exists within what some fans have called the Roiland-verse, a loose collection of animated properties that share a similar aesthetic sensibility and occasionally cross-reference each other. This includes Solar Opposites, a show co-created by Roiland and former Rick and Morty showrunner Mike McMahon for Hulu, which takes many of the same themes of alien fish-out-of-water comedy and gives them a somewhat different emotional texture. Solar Opposites features characters drawn in the same style using similar technology, interacting with the same kind of oblivious suburban world. While they are not canonically the same universe, the visual and tonal family resemblance is unmistakable and very much intentional. Secret number 11. The show initially aired with the in-house pilot title of simply Rick and Morty, and the pilot episode was mostly written and animated on a very tight budget and timeline. The pilot has a noticeably rougher visual quality compared to what the show would become just a season later, as the animation studio found its footing and the character designs were refined. Beth and Jerry's faces changed subtly between the pilot and subsequent episodes. The interior of the Smith house was slightly redesigned, and the color palette became more vivid and defined. Most viewers do not notice these shifts because they happen gradually and naturally, but watching the pilot back-to-back with almost any episode from Season 2 reveals a genuine visual evolution. Secret number 12. Channel 101, the festival where Harmon and Roiland met, was explicitly designed around the idea of creators making content for themselves, rather than for networks. The festival's philosophy was that if you made something genuinely funny, smart, or interesting to you personally, an audience would find it. This philosophy is deeply embedded in Rick and Morty's DNA. Now, the show consistently makes choices that prioritize the writer's own interests and amusements over obvious commercial logic. Episodes like Rick's Minutes, which consist largely of improvisational comedy sketched around the premise of interdimensional cable television, exist because the writers thought the concept was funny, not because a focus group approved it. Secret number 13. The writing process for Rick and Morty has been described by multiple staff members as unusually organic, even by animated television standards. The writer's room begins with discussions that frequently pull from personal anecdotes, philosophical questions the writers are wrestling with, and science fiction concepts that excite them. These raw ingredients are then broken into story structures using Harmon's framework. The result is a show that often feels simultaneously personal and cosmic, intimate and vast. Episodes about family therapy or marital insecurity sit alongside episodes about galactic empires, and the tonal range feels natural rather than jarring. because both types of story emerge from the same place. Secret number 14. One of the most consistently clever things about the show's construction is its use of cold opens. Nearly every episode of Rick and Morty begins with a mini-adventure that concludes before the opening credits roll, and this mini-adventure is almost never directly related to the main story of the episode. The writers use these cold opens as a way of signaling to the audience that the show operates in a universe where extraordinary things happen constantly, not just during designated plot time. By the time the credits roll, you have already watched what would count as a complete B-plot in most other shows, and the actual episode hasn't started yet. Secret number 15. Dan Harmon's background in improvisational comedy and his deep familiarity with the work of Christopher Vogler, who wrote a famous guide to narrative structure based on Campbell's Hero's Journey, both contributed to an unusual writing philosophy: the idea that structure should generate surprise, not prevent it. Harmon believes that a well-constructed story can contain genuinely unexpected emotional beats, precisely because the structural foundation is solid enough to support them. This is why Rick and Morty can make you laugh and then break your heart in the span of a single scene. The sadness lands harder because it arrives within a framework that also knows exactly where to put the punchline. Secret number 16. The show has always had an unusually complicated relationship with its own popularity. As it became a genuine cultural phenomenon, particularly after the third season, the writers grew increasingly self-conscious about the expectations that fame created. Episodes in later seasons frequently acknowledge the show's own cultural weight in meta ways, making jokes about fan expectations, serialized storytelling, and the pressure to produce canonical revelations. This self-awareness is both a strength and a defense mechanism, allowing the show to comment on its own mythology without fully committing to any one interpretation of it. Secret number 17. Before the show premiered, Adult Swim ran a very limited promotional campaign for it. There was no significant advertising push, no major cross-platform marketing strategy. The show largely found its initial audience through word of mouth and through Adult Swim's existing loyal late-night viewership. By the time the second season aired, Rick and Morty had already generated the kind of passionate, community-driven following that advertising budgets of millions of dollars could not manufacture. Secret number 18. The show's title sequence, that brief, chaotic montage of Rick and Morty careening through dimension after dimension before landing in the garage, contains dozens of visual references and jokes that change slightly from season to season. Sharp-eyed viewers have cataloged changes to the sequence that foreshadow plot elements of upcoming seasons, reference events from past episodes, or simply exist as visual gags that most people never pause long enough to see clearly. The sequence is designed to be watched repeatedly and rewards that repetition with hidden layers of detail. Secret number 19. The show was greenlit without a formal pilot episode test screening process. Adult Swim's then general manager, Mike Lazo, had a philosophy of trusting the instincts of the creators he commissioned, rather than subjecting work to the committee-driven approval processes common at larger networks. This meant that Rick and Morty was essentially approved based on the concept and on Harmon and Roiland's track records, without the kind of audience testing that frequently sands the edges off of genuinely strange creative work. But the show reached audiences in essentially the form its creators intended, without the usual compromises. Secret number 20. The show debuted on a Monday night in December 2013 to modest ratings. It was not an overnight explosion. The audience grew steadily through the first season, and the passionate online discussion it generated, particularly on Reddit and later on social media, created a self-reinforcing cycle where the show kept gaining new viewers who then became enthusiastic ambassadors for it. The path from cult curiosity to genuine cultural landmark took about 3 years, coinciding roughly with the long gap between Season 2 and Season 3, during which the fanbase grew impatient and very, very loud. Section 2. Behind the Cameras. Production Secrets and Creative Chaos. The making of Rick and Morty has been, by almost every account, a fascinating and occasionally turbulent process. To understand why the show is the way it is, you need to understand some of what was happening in the room where it was made. Secret number 21. Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland had genuinely different creative instincts and personalities. Harmon is a writer first. Someone who finds meaning in structure, character development, and earned emotional payoff. Roiland was a performer and animator first, someone who thrived on spontaneity, improvisation, and the kind of humor that surprises you before you have time to think about whether it is appropriate. These differences produced a show that was richer for containing both impulses, but they also produced genuine friction behind the scenes. Secret number 22. According to multiple people who worked on the show, there came a point during the production of Season 2 where Harmon hired several writers from his previous show, Community, without fully communicating the decision to Roiland. From Harmon's perspective, he was simply building out the writer's room with experienced people he trusted. From Roiland's perspective, it felt like his creative partner was gradually taking control of what had originally been his concept. The tension that developed from this misunderstanding would affect the production of the show for years. Secret number 23. By the third season, Roiland had largely stopped coming into the office. Reports from the time describe him occasionally arriving to walk his dogs around the studio or to give informal tours to celebrity visitors, but while the actual writing continued without him. A mediator was eventually brought in to address the growing distance between the two creators, but the mediation was unsuccessful. Roiland and Harmon continued to share a co-creator credit, but their working relationship had, by all accounts, effectively ended. Secret number 24. Despite the behind-the-scenes difficulties, the long wait between Season 2 and Season 3, which lasted nearly 2 years, was not primarily caused by the interpersonal conflict. It was caused by the show's writers working through the consequences of the second season's finale and trying to construct a third season that honored the emotional and narrative weight of what they had set up. The delay frustrated fans enormously, but the third season is widely considered one of the show's strongest, which suggests the extra time was not wasted. Secret number 25. The Season 3 premiere, The Rick Shank Rickdemption, aired entirely without warning on April 1st, 2017. Adult Swim broadcast the episode on April Fool's Day as what appeared to be a stunt, then ran it continuously for several hours as ratings climbed with each airing. It was one of the stranger and more effective promotional strategies in cable television history. Fans who had waited nearly 2 years for new episodes suddenly had one, playing on loop, on a day specifically associated with tricks and jokes. The surreal quality of the situation felt entirely in keeping with the show itself. Secret number 26. 6. At the end of each episode of Rick and Morty, the screen displays a brief production logo for Dan Harmon's personal vanity card, called Harmonious Claptrap. In the first 2 seasons, this image showed Harmon seated comfortably with his wife and their pets. After Harmon's marriage ended in divorce in 2015, the card quietly changed. The new image depicted Harmon alone on a couch, surrounded by bottles of alcohol and what appeared to be general household chaos. Still with his pets, but without his wife. Most viewers watch the show on streaming platforms and skip the end credits entirely, meaning this small, honest record of personal pain passed completely unnoticed by the majority of the audience. Secret number 27. Roiland typically recorded his dialogue for both Rick and Morty in separate sessions, which created a unique technical challenge for the audio engineers and editors. When Rick and Morty argue, interrupt each other, or talk over one another, those overlapping voices were recorded at completely different times and then layered together in post-production. The natural, chaotic quality of their conversations was essentially an editing illusion. Roiland's improvisational style meant that individual sessions often produced far more material than was needed, and editors would assemble the best takes into something that sounded spontaneous even though it was carefully constructed. Secret number 28. The show is animated primarily by a studio called Bardell Entertainment in Vancouver, Canada, with additional work done at various studios depending on season and episode. The characters were originally designed with a deliberately simple aesthetic that could be animated efficiently, but the environments and backgrounds grew progressively more detailed as the show's budget increased. By the 3rd and 4th seasons, individual episode backgrounds contained an extraordinary amount of visual information, with alien cities, interdimensional spaces, and extraterrestrial landscapes rendered with real depth and visual interest. Secret number 29. Many of the scientific equations and formulas that appear in the show are real, or at least real enough to be recognizable to someone with a physics background. The production team has included consultants with scientific backgrounds over the years, and the writers have done genuine research into topics like quantum mechanics, astrophysics, and biology before writing episodes that hinge on those concepts. The show takes creative liberties with the science, naturally, but it tends to engage with real ideas rather than simply inventing plausible-sounding nonsense. Secret number 30. One of the most subtle and consistent technical details in the entire show is how the show writes time. In the background of many scenes involving Rick's notes, chalkboards, or computer screens, time is written using vector notation rather than as a simple quantity. This detail, which probably 99% of viewers never notice, is the show's way of suggesting that Rick has solved the problem of time as a direction of travel rather than simply a duration. In real physics, vector quantities have both magnitude and direction. By writing time vectorially, the background art is quietly implying that, in Rick's understanding, time is something you can point toward and travel through. Secret number 31. The show has an extremely small team of writers relative to its output. Most popular animated series maintain large writers' rooms with dozens of staff. Rick and Morty has typically operated with a much smaller group. Former showrunner and current head writer Scott Marder described the process as being deeply dependent on each writer pulling enormous weight, with the quality of individual episode pitches and scripts being disproportionately important compared to shows where more voices dilute individual contributions. The show's consistent voice is in part a function of how few people are involved in creating it. Secret number 32. Episode titles in Rick and Morty follow a specific pattern that has become a running joke both within the show and among its writers. Most titles are puns on existing film or television titles, with Rick or Mort substituted in where possible. The Rick Shank Redemption, A Rickle in Time. The Wedding Squanchers, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. The writers clearly take genuine delight in constructing these puns, and the worse and more groan-inducing the pun, the more affection it tends to receive. The Season 8 episode, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a play on The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, is a perfect example of this tradition reaching its natural endpoint. Secret number 33. Adult Swim wanted the show to be compatible with primetime television standards, which means that despite its reputation for pushing content limits, the episodes are technically designed to fit a TV-14 rating. The show achieves its adult tone through implication, context, and the sheer existential weight of what it is depicting rather than through explicit content. A scene like Rick and Morty burying their own dead bodies in the backyard is deeply disturbing, without violating any broadcast standard. The show has mastered the art of psychological darkness that is technically clean. Secret number 34. Several former Rick and Morty writers have gone on to impressive careers in Hollywood, and many of them have explicitly credited their time on the show as their most formative professional experience. Michael Waldron, who was a writer on the show, went on to write the Disney Plus series Loki, the film Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and both upcoming Avengers films. Jeff Loveness went on to write Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Mike McMahon created Solar Opposites, and then Star Trek Lower Decks. The show functioned, at various points, as an unusually productive incubator for talent that would reshape multiple corners of popular entertainment. Secret number 35. Dan Harmon's philosophy about television comedy has always included a belief that the audience should be trusted to keep up. He has spoken extensively about his distaste for comedies that explain their own jokes, or that add emotional signposting so heavy it eliminates the possibility of the audience reaching their own conclusions. In Rick and Morty, the emotional beats are almost never highlighted with swelling music or long silences that announce their importance. Rick's most devastating moments of vulnerability tend to arrive quickly, pass quickly, and get buried under the next joke almost immediately. The effect is a show that trusts you to catch what it is doing. Secret number 36. The Adult Swim block that airs Rick and Morty also airs other animated series that have occasionally referenced or acknowledged the show's existence. The interconnected nature of the Adult Swim late-night lineup has occasionally produced cross-references that technically occur in different animated universes, but feel like they share the same late-night television DNA. This shared sensibility has led some fans to construct elaborate theories about multiple Adult Swim shows existing in the same fictional space. which is almost certainly not intentional on any official level, but is also not something the creators have gone out of their way to definitively deny. Secret number 37. The show went through several different color palettes during the early development process before settling on the relatively muted, slightly washed out tones that characterize the suburban sections of the show, contrasted with the much more vivid and saturated colors used to depict alien environments and other dimensions. This contrast is entirely intentional. The dullness of the domestic world and the vibrancy of the interdimensional one is a visual argument. The show is constantly making about the relative richness of extraordinary experience versus ordinary life. You feel it subconsciously even if you never consciously register it. Secret number 38. Several of the show's most beloved one-time characters have backstories that were developed in the writer's room and never appeared on screen. So the writers have spoken in interviews about having detailed internal histories for characters like Mr. Nimbus, the undersea king who claims to control the police and has a history with Rick that is strongly implied to involve Rick's late wife, Diane. None of this has been explicitly shown, but the writer's room knows it. This unseen depth gives characters like Nimbus a weight and specificity that elevates them above ordinary one-off cameos. Secret number 39. The show's post-credits scenes, which appear after the main episode's narrative has concluded, have been used for everything from comedic codas to genuine narrative revelations to small character moments that add unexpected emotional texture to what came before. The Mr. Poopy Butthole post-credits scenes, which appear sporadically across multiple seasons and show his life progressing in real time, constitute a complete secondary narrative arc that exists entirely outside the main show. He recovers from being shot, gets married, has a child, and addresses the audience at the end of each season with genuine warmth, as though he has been watching the season alongside you. Secret number 40. A box clearly labeled Time Travel Stuff can be seen in the background of Rick's garage in multiple episodes, sitting on a shelf as if deliberately set aside and forgotten. This is the show's visual representation of its creator's stance on time travel as a narrative device, which Harmon and the writers have repeatedly described as a storytelling cheat they prefer to avoid because it removes meaningful consequences from any action a character takes. The box is visible because the show wants you to know it thought about time travel and chose to leave it on the shelf. In Season 4, the box makes it off the shelf during the episode Rattlestar Ricklactica, the show's first genuine engagement with actual time travel as a plot mechanism, and the episode is self-consciously uncomfortable about this the entire way through. Secret number 41. Justin Roiland developed a habit of writing the brief, often surreal episode descriptions that appeared in TV listings and on streaming platforms. These descriptions, which frequently used in-universe language, addressed the viewer in bizarre ways or simply refused to actually describe the episode, became a small cult object in themselves. Roiland wrote these for the first several seasons. Now, it is currently unknown who has been writing them since his departure. Secret number 42. The show commissioned an actual concept album before the third season premiered, called the Rick and Morty soundtrack, featuring music that appeared in various episodes. One of the songs from this album, the bouncy Get Swifty, which Rick performs on stage while giant alien heads watch from orbit, became a genuine chart success. It reached number 33 on Billboard's Hot Rock Songs chart in September of 2017, which is an outcome that by any reasonable measure should have been impossible for a song whose lyrics are largely instructions for how to remove your pants in front of godlike alien beings. Secret number 43. The show's visual effects team has developed several proprietary techniques designed for depicting the characteristic green portals that Rick uses to travel between dimensions. The portals are designed to feel physically real in a way that distinguishes them from the generic glowing circles used in most science fiction animation. They have a particular liquidity to them, a sense of something viscous and slightly organic, which contributes to the feeling that they are genuinely violating the surface of reality rather than simply creating a clean doorway through it. Secret number 44. 4. Several writers and crew members from Rick and Morty have given extensive interviews about the specific atmosphere in the writer's room during the show's most celebrated periods. They describe a process that was emotionally demanding, intellectually exhausting, and genuinely exhilarating, in which personal experiences were mined openly and used as raw material for stories about an alcoholic genius who cannot admit he loves his family. The parallels between Rick's emotional unavailability and certain dynamics in the writer's room itself have been noted by more than one former staff member, though never described as a direct one-to-one correspondence. Secret number 45. The show has produced two fully animated Japanese-style shorts that aired without announcement on Toonami, Adult Swim's anime programming block. The first, Samurai and Shogun, aired on March 29, 2020, and was entirely in Japanese with a distinctly different visual aesthetic from the main series. The second, Rick and Morty vs. Genocider, aired on July 26, 2020, and both starred the actors from the Japanese dub of the main series and were produced by Japanese animation studios. They are technically canon, or at least exist in some adjacent relationship to the main show, and most Western fans have no idea they exist. Section 3. The First Secrets. Hidden details in Seasons 1 and 2, settling in now. Let the images form gently. The green portals open and close. The garage hums with quiet electricity. There are more things hidden in the background of this show than most people ever stop long enough to find. Secret number 46. The very first episode of the show, the pilot, contains a scene at an interdimensional customs hall that is essentially a Where's Waldo illustration for science fiction fans. The background is packed with alien silhouettes drawn in the style of iconic creatures from other franchises. Among those clearly identifiable are the distinctive prawn-like alien from the 2009 film District 9, a xenomorph from the Alien franchise, and a Moonanite from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Three figures in the background are shaped specifically like Tom Servo, Crow T. Robot, and Gypsy from Mystery Science Theater 3000. There is also a silhouette that matches the iconic alien from the classic arcade game Space Invaders. Secret number 47. The title of the second episode, Lawnmower Dog, is a reference to a Stephen King short story and its 1992 film adaptation, The Lawnmower Man, in which a man develops telepathic abilities after exposure to virtual reality. In the Rick and Morty version, Morty's dog Snuffles gains superintelligence through a helmet Rick builds, leading to a canine uprising. The parallel is not exact, but the structural idea, ordinary being becomes dangerous through enhancement technology, is the same. Secret number 48. In that same episode, the dream-entering device Rick creates is an obvious reference to Christopher Nolan's 2010 film Inception. The show's take on the premise pushes further than the film by having the dream-within-dream structure continue until it has no meaningful relationship to reality, which is both a comedic escalation and a gentle critique of the concept. Secret number 49. In the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, after the credits roll, we are taken into Rick's bedroom, where Jerry is sitting on Rick's cot, looking morose. But what is interesting about this scene is not Jerry. It is Rick's wall behind him, which is covered in photographs, strings, and pinned notes that constitute what appears to be a conspiracy board tracking every adventure Rick and Morty have been on. Among the photographs visible are a Cronenberg monster, a Mr. Meeseeks, Prince Nebulon, Dr. Zenon Bloom from Anatomy Park, and, in a remarkable detail, a photograph of Aberdolf Linkler, who would not appear in the show until the following episode. The conspiracy board predicts the future. Secret number 50. The Gravity Falls crossover is one of the most beloved and carefully documented Easter eggs in the show's history. In that same episode, as Rick is being pursued through portals by the Council of Ricks, one of the portals disgorges a specific combination of objects: a pen, a notepad, and a mug with a question mark on it. In a Gravity Falls episode called Society of the Blind Eye, the post-credits gag shows the character Grunkle Stan losing those exact three items through a universe portal. The two events are connected. Rick's portal briefly intersects with Stanford Pine's portal, and objects exchange between them. Justin Roiland and Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch planned this crossover deliberately, and it remains one of the show's most precisely constructed pieces of universe building. Secret number 51. In Total Recall, the Parasite episode, if you pay close attention to the episode that precedes it in the broadcast order, Morty Night Run, you can see Rick collecting green rocks from an alien environment and loading them into his spaceship. Clinging to those rocks are small, bright pink eggs. Those pink eggs are the parasites. The invasion of the Smith house was seeded by Rick's own casual disregard for the things he carried home from alien environments. He brought the parasites with him and had no idea. It is one of the show's most perfectly structured pieces of continuity, and you can only see it if you watch both episodes and look carefully. Secret number 52. 2. The show has maintained careful continuity with the physical state of the Smith house since the very first season finale, when the family home was teleported to an alien planet and then returned to Earth. The experience left a large crack in the driveway. That crack remains visible in nearly every subsequent exterior shot of the house. The animators have never erased it. Similarly, various other forms of physical damage to the house accumulated over the seasons have been preserved in the background art as a running record of everything the family has survived. Secret number 53. Dan Harmon appears in the show as the voice of Bird Person. Harmon's voice, with some processing, is used for the deep, measured, somewhat melancholic tones of Rick's oldest and closest friend. Given that many of the writers and producers have described Rick as being, at least in part, based on Dan Harmon, the choice to have Harmon himself voice the character who represents Rick's better nature and lasting loyalty is either a coincidence or a rather pointed piece of casting. Secret number 54. In the second season episode, Autoerotic Assimilation, while Rick is occupied with Unity, his ex, Summer and Morty are attempting to find their own way home. During a scene set within Unity's collective consciousness, a group of aliens can be seen seated around a table in a configuration that exactly mirrors the study group from Community, arranged in the same positions they occupy in that show's title sequence. Rick tells Unity to make him a television show, and she creates this. It is Harmon putting a Community reunion into the background of Rick and Morty. Secret number 55. The Season 2 episode Morty Night Run contains a background detail that has become something of a legend among fans who noticed it. When Rick sells off a weapon to a character named Chrombopulus Michael, a Gromflomite assassin, at the outset of the episode, you can spot a Meeseeks, the blue helper creatures from Season 1, wandering through the background of the space market. He is not acknowledged, not referenced, and plays no role in the plot. He is simply there, living his life in the universe, presumably trying to complete whatever task some unlucky person gave him. Secret number 56. The parasite in Total Recall that the family initially cannot identify or eliminate is Mr. Poopy Butthole. The entire premise of the episode is that parasites can only implant positive memories, meaning you can identify them by checking whether you have any bad memories of them. The family goes through their recollections of Mr. Poopy Butthole and can find only warm, happy moments. Beth concludes he must be a parasite and shoots him. But he is not a parasite. He is real. He was genuinely that positive, that consistently kind, that he was indistinguishable from a fabricated construct designed to generate goodwill. It is one of the darkest jokes the show has ever made about what true kindness looks like in a world full of deception. Secret number 57. The Season 2 episode Big Trouble in Little Sanchez contains a subtle Gravity Falls reference that is easy to miss. When Beth and Jerry attend alien marriage counseling in this episode, the monitors in the background display various images, one of which is a clearly recognizable triangle with a single eye inside it, the symbolic form of Gravity Falls villain Bill Cipher. This is one of several instances where Gravity Falls iconography appears in Rick and Morty, part of the ongoing cross-referential relationship between the two shows. Secret number 58. The character of Dr. Wong, as the therapist who appears in Pickle Rick, was deliberately designed to be the smartest person in the room during her scenes with Rick. The writers have spoken about how much care went into ensuring that her argument against Rick was airtight, that it could not be dismissed, that it had to be acknowledged even by the audience members who most identify with Rick's worldview. Dr. Wong is voiced by Susan Sarandon, who brought a stillness and authority to the role that could not be manufactured through writing alone. Secret number 59. The Season 1 episode Rick Potion number 9 ends with Rick and Morty abandoning their original dimension after Rick's love potion mutates the entire human population into grotesque hybrid creatures. And they travel to a dimension where a different version of themselves has just died while successfully correcting the same mistake, bury their own bodies in the backyard, and take over those versions' lives. This is presented as an efficient solution. The original dimension, Cronenberged and ruined, continues to exist. Beth, Jerry, and Summer continue living in it. The show never returns to that dimension, but it did not cease to exist when Rick and Morty left it. Secret number 60. In 60 Minutes, Summer and Morty discover that in many alternate realities, they were never born, and their parents had significantly better lives as a result. Morty responds with what has become one of the most quoted speeches in the show's history, telling Summer that nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, and everybody is going to die. And he then invites her to watch television. The speech lands differently depending on whether you read it as nihilism or liberation. The writers intended it as both simultaneously, which is the show's defining tonal trick. Secret number 61. The Citadel of Ricks first appears in close Rick counters of the Rick kind as what appears to be simply a clever plot device, a place where all the Ricks from across the multiverse organize themselves. The full implications of the Citadel, its economy, its class system, its political structure, and its role as a mirror for real-world power dynamics would not be fully explored until the third season episode, The Ricklantis Mix-Up. That later episode is widely considered one of the show's greatest achievements. Everything it needed to work was established quietly in Season 1. Secret number 62. The show's first season was specifically designed to avoid the continuity-heavy approach that had defined some of Harmon's community work. Harmon has spoken about wanting Rick and Morty to feel accessible to someone who had never seen a previous episode, so that Adult Swim's late-night broadcast model, where viewers might tune in at any point, would still work. The season is largely episodic as a result, with a few small threads running through it. Beginning with the second season and accelerating in the third, the show became progressively more willing to build ongoing stories that rewarded sustained attention. Secret number 63. The opening credits sequence of the show, which depicts Rick and Morty tumbling through various dimensional adventures before ending up back in the garage, while it was created with the specific intention of conveying that the adventures the viewer is about to see are just one slice of an ongoing, far larger journey. The sequence implies dozens of other adventures happening simultaneously and continuously, most of which the viewer will never see. This implication, that Rick and Morty's universe is far larger than any single episode or season can contain, is one of the show's most powerful structural choices. Secret number 64. Rick's ship, which features throughout the series as both a transport and an occasional character in its own right, has a computer system that is voiced by a digital recreation of Diane, Rick's deceased wife. This detail is not announced or explained in the show. The voice of the ship simply sounds like a calm, a feminine presence that addresses Rick with a particular warmth. It was confirmed by the show's creative team in supplemental material, and it reframes every scene aboard the ship as Rick choosing to hear his dead wife's voice while traveling the universe. Secret number 65. The second season finale, The Wedding Squanchers, ends with Rick surrendering himself to the Galactic Federation to prevent consequences for his family. It is arguably the most emotionally generous thing Rick does in the entire first two seasons. A man who has spent much of the show behaving selfishly, choosing, in a quiet moment, to sacrifice his freedom for the people he claims not to care about. The episode was written with full knowledge that the creative team had not yet figured out how the third season would resolve the situation. Secret number 66. In something Rick, this way comes. The devil opens a shop in town selling cursed items, and Rick systematically debunks every curse, destroying the devil's business model in the process. At the end of the episode, Summer and Rick have a brief montage where they work out together in preparation for confronting the devil's new corporate empire. This montage ends with both of them having become enormously muscular, a visual joke that is funny on its own terms, and also a commentary on the kind of escalating power fantasies that drive action movie training sequences. Secret number 67. 7. The title of the episode, A Wrinkle in Time, is a double pun. It is obviously a play on A Wrinkle in Time, Madeleine L'Engle's classic science fiction novel. But a wrinkle is also an archaic English word meaning a loosely assembled pile of things that could fall apart at any moment. Given that the episode is about time fracturing into unstable parallel branches, this secondary meaning is very much intentional. Secret number 68. When the truth tortoise appears in Morty's Mind Blowers and tells Morty a secret that Morty immediately begs Rick to erase, the show does not tell you what the secret is. However, if you play the audio of the tortoise's speech backward, you hear the words, "I'm a beetle," "Paul is dead," in what sounds like Justin Roiland's voice. This is a reference to the famous conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by a lookalike, with the remaining Beatles supposedly hiding backward messages about it throughout their music. Whether the tortoise is speaking a universal truth or whether the tortoise is a Beatle conspiracy is left deliberately ambiguous. Secret number 69. The show's approach to religion is consistently irreverent, but not ignorant. Various episodes feature godlike beings, cosmic entities, and creatures with divine powers, and almost none of them are particularly admirable. The show treats the idea of supreme beings with the same skepticism it applies to government institutions, corporate structures, and other systems designed to concentrate power. When a creature appears to be a god in Rick and Morty, the most common narrative outcome is that it turns out to be flawed, self-interested, or simply not as powerful as claimed. Secret number 70. The character Jerry Smith was designed from the beginning to represent a specific cultural type. The well-meaning, unremarkable everyman who occupies spaces he did not quite earn and clings to them with desperate tenacity. He is not a bad person. He is a person who has been placed in a context that makes visible every inadequacy he possesses. The writers have spoken about the discomfort they feel at how easy Jerry is to mock, and how important it was to them that the show occasionally let him win, or let him show capability so that his failures felt like real failures rather than simply the expected outcomes of an idiot's blundering. Secret number 71. The Meeseeks, the blue helper creatures summoned from the Mr. Meeseeks box, were originally conceived as a single throwaway joke in Season 1. The episode Me Seeks and Destroy was designed to be self-contained. When the character proved to be extraordinarily popular with audiences, the writers made the deliberate decision not to overuse them. Me Seeks appearances in subsequent seasons are rare and treated as special events. This restraint is one of the less celebrated but genuinely important creative decisions the show has made. Secret number 72. The episode Ricksty Minutes was largely improvised. Much of the interdimensional cable content that Rick and Morty watched together on the couch was created by Justin Roiland doing live improvisational performance, inventing alien television shows, commercials, and programs on the spot. The episode was designed specifically to showcase this improvisational ability. The result is a collection of absurdist vignettes, Gazerpazorp, at the steroid-addled fitness video instructor, the surreal ball fondler's action trailer, that feel genuinely strange and funny in a way that written material cannot quite replicate because they have the quality of something being discovered in real time. Secret number 73. 3. Aberdolf Linkler, the character who appears at Rick's party and claims to be Rick's greatest creation, a genetic combination of Adolf Hitler and Abraham Lincoln intended to create a morally neutral superbeing, is voiced by Maurice LaMarche. LaMarche is best known for voicing the Brain in Pinky and the Brain and has an extraordinary range as a voice actor. The casting of LaMarche for a character who is literally a confused combination of history's most famous embodiment of evil leadership and history's most celebrated embodiment of moral leadership is either deeply considered or wonderfully coincidental, and possibly both. Secret number 74. The Season 1 finale, Ricksy Business, in which Rick throws a house party while Beth and Jerry are away, contains a throwaway detail that becomes significant only much later. During the party, Rick's old friends Birdperson and Squanchy appear together for the first time. There is a warmth between them and Rick that suggests a history far longer and deeper than the episode has time to explore. The full weight of that history, the resistance movement, the years of fighting alongside each other, the personal losses, though would not be explored until much later seasons. But the warmth is there from the beginning, quietly waiting for the story to catch up to it. Secret number 75. The second season episode Get Swifty is the most purely silly episode of the show's first two seasons, and arguably the most purely silly episode in the show's entire run. The premise, enormous alien heads descend to Earth demanding musical entertainment under threat of planetary destruction, is so straightforwardly ridiculous that no further irony or deconstruction is needed. The writers have described it as a palate cleanser episode, made specifically to give the audience a break from the more emotionally complex material on either side of it. It works precisely because everyone involved fully committed to the absurdity without reservation. Section 4. Deeper into the multiverse. Secrets from Seasons 3 and 4. The light is settling, you are traveling further in now, past the familiar edges of the show, into territories that fewer viewers have mapped in detail. Secret number 76. The Ricklantis Mix-Up, the Season 3 episode also known as Tales from the Citadel, is one of the most structurally ambitious episodes of any animated television series ever made. While Rick and Morty are away on an adventure that the episode never depicts, the focus shifts entirely to the Citadel, where multiple interweaving storylines unfold simultaneously across several different social strata of Rick and Morty society. The episode was written as a deliberate critique of systemic inequality and institutional corruption, using the language of animated science fiction to say things about power and exploitation that the show could not say as directly in its main character storylines. Secret number 77. Diamond. In the background of the Ricklantis mix-up, during a scene depicting the crowds of the Citadel, a Rick wearing a long scarf and dressed in a distinctive outfit can be seen in the crowd. This is a Doctor Who Rick, a character dressed as the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker's version of the character. The reference is brief and background level, entirely easy to miss, and rewards careful viewing. Secret number 78. Evil Morty's first appearance in Season 1 is a masterclass in misdirection. He appears to be a victim, a Morty among Mortys being held captive by a rogue Rick. The episode's mystery is framed as finding out which Rick is responsible for the abductions and tortures. The reveal that Evil Morty has been controlling the evil Rick, using him as a puppet, fundamentally restructures everything the audience thought they understood about the relationship between Ricks and Mortys. A Morty was in control the entire time. Nobody suspected it because nobody ever suspects a Morty. Secret number 79. The episode Morty's Mind Blowers reveals that Rick and Morty have had a secret tradition of erasing Morty's most traumatic memories and storing them in blue vials. This means that the Morty the audience has been watching is a curated version of himself, one who has been repeatedly edited for his own protection. But several of the stored emotions. Which Rick and Morty watch together after losing track of which memories belong to whom, reveal events where it was Rick's mistake, not Morty's trauma, that created the problem. Rick has been erasing his own failures from Morty's memory, not just protecting Morty from pain, but protecting himself from accountability. Secret number 80. There is a vial in the Mind Blowers room labeled Stanford, a reference to Ford Pines, the character also known as the author from Gravity Falls. There is another vial labeled Bill C, a reference to Gravity Falls antagonist Bill Cipher. These two labels, sitting quietly among Morty's erased memories, suggest that at some point in some adventure that was never shown, Morty encountered characters from the Gravity Falls universe in a way significant enough to warrant memory erasure. Secret number 81. So the Season 3 episode Rest and Ricklaxation features a toxicity removal process that splits Rick and Morty into their toxic and non-toxic halves. In the background of the tank where their toxicity is stored, a decaying figure identifiable as 8-Ball, one of Bill Cipher's associates from the Nightmare Realm in Gravity Falls, can be seen. Another Gravity Falls crossover, embedded in background art, easy to miss unless you know exactly what you are looking for. Secret number 82. Pickle Rick is the most analyzed episode in the show's history, and deservedly so, but there is a detail about it that is rarely discussed. when Rick transforms himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy, and then spends the episode fighting through a building full of assassins as a pickle equipped with improvised weapons. Now, the episode is simultaneously making two completely different arguments. The first argument is that Rick is so brilliant and so driven that even in the least advantageous form imaginable, he can accomplish extraordinary things. The second argument, which Dr. Wong articulates in the therapy scene, is that Rick's ability to accomplish those extraordinary things is precisely the problem. It allows him to avoid sitting in a room and being honest about his feelings. Secret number 83. The Season 3 episode. The ABCs of Beth contains a significant revelation about Beth's childhood that reframes her as a character. Rick reveals that many of the dark and violent toys Beth asked him to build when she was a child were not unusual requests from Rick's perspective. He treats them as entirely normal creative projects for a child with a curious mind. The implication is that Beth was always more like Rick than either of them fully acknowledges that the darkness she keeps carefully managed in her adult life is the same darkness that Rick has never managed at all. Secret number 84. In the Season 4 episode Never Rick and Morty, which takes place on a literal story train controlled by a villain called Story Lord, Rick and Morty encounter several characters who are representations of narrative concepts. Among them is one called Connie Tunity Error, who has the power to break series continuity, Flashback, who can replay past events, and Protego Nick, who can make any character the main character of the story. These are personified versions of the tools available to any writer of episodic fiction. So the episode is Dan Harmon's most elaborate commentary on the act of storytelling itself, and it uses the entire apparatus of animation to say things about narrative that prose could not express as vividly. Secret number 85. That same episode features a non-canon appearance by Evil Morty, who shows up leading an army of returning characters in a sequence explicitly labeled as outside the main continuity. The show is using Evil Morty as a symbol for the kind of fan expectation it wants to subvert, the demand that every appearance of a popular character advance their storyline in a meaningful way. By bringing him back as a joke within a meta-narrative, the episode acknowledges how much pressure exists around that character, while pointedly refusing to satisfy it. Secret number 86. The Season 4 episode The Vat of Acid episode contains a reference to Moe's Tavern from The Simpsons, visible in the background of a restaurant scene. Earlier in the same episode, Rick mentions that the entire premise of Morty's plan has already been done by Futurama, a show created by Simpsons creator Matt Groening. The episode is thus making the same joke twice simultaneously, once through Rick's dialogue, once through the background art. Secret number 87. Rick's disavowal of time travel as a storytelling device is directly connected to a real-world event. Dan Harmon once performed a roast of Christopher Nolan's film Interstellar at his podcast Harmontown, in which he took specific issue with the film's use of time travel as a plot mechanism. During the Vat of Acid episode, but when Rick is coerced into building a device that functions like a save and reload button for Morty's life choices, the montage of Morty using the device is scored to Eric Clapton's song, It's in the Way That You Use It. This specific song was chosen because it was played at that specific Harmontown roast. It is a private joke that connects real-world Harmon to in-universe Rick's disdain for the same concept. Secret number 88. The 4th season premiere, Edge of Tomorty, Rick. Die Rick Pete kills Rick multiple times in its opening act and depicts his consciousness transferring through a series of increasingly divergent cloned bodies. The episode's premise draws from Hugh Everett's Many Worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, specifically the idea that every time a quantum event could go one of multiple ways, and all outcomes occur in different branches of reality. The show uses this concept to explore what identity means when it is separable from any particular physical form. Secret number 89. The Season 4 episode Children of Mort reveals that Rick has an enormous number of children scattered across the universe, conceived during his time with the hive mind entity Unity. This detail retroactively adds an additional layer to Rick's already complex emotional situation. A man haunted by the loss of one daughter has been casually fathering others across the multiverse, apparently without any particular emotional engagement. The show presents this not as a contradiction of Rick's stated emotional depth, but as further evidence of how thorough his avoidance of genuine connection has become. Secret number 90. Boss, the episode Star Mort Rick Turn of the Jerry. In Season 4 contains a moment where Rick, who has cloned Beth at some earlier point, finally faces the question of whether Space Beth, the adventurous clone who has been living a different life, is the real Beth or the clone. The show deliberately refuses to resolve this question. Rick tells both Beths that he genuinely does not know which one is which, and that he has no way of finding out. From a narrative standpoint, this ambiguity is a gift to the writers. It allows both versions of Beth to be treated as equally real, equally valuable, and equally deserving of stories, without having to commit to a canonical answer that would foreclose possibilities. Secret number 91. In the Rick Churian Morty date, while at the Season 3 finale in which Rick and Morty have a falling out, and Rick attempts to replace Morty with President Curtis, the President of the United States is voiced by Keith David, an actor best known for serious dramatic roles in films like They Live and The Thing. The show uses David's natural gravitas to make the president a surprisingly dignified and even funny character, someone who is simultaneously dealing with Rick's antics and maintaining the dignity of his office with complete sincerity. Keith David returned for several subsequent appearances, and the president has become a fan favorite precisely because of this casting choice. Secret number 92. There is a photograph hanging in the Smith house, visible in multiple episodes, of a man standing in a crowd with his arms crossed, while everyone around him performs a particular salute. This photograph is believed to be of August Landmesser, a German dock worker photographed in 1936, who was the only person visible in the image who refused to give the Nazi salute at a naval ceremony. The photograph is a symbol of individual moral resistance to collective coercion. Its presence in the background of the Smith house, unremarked upon by any character, is a piece of visual storytelling that says something about what kind of moral universe the show believes it inhabits. Secret number 93. The Season 4 episode Rattlestar Ricklactica, the show's first genuine engagement with time travel as a plot device, involves space snakes and a snake time travel paradox that spirals out of control. The episode is extremely self-conscious about the fact that it is using a device the show has spent years avoiding. Rick is visibly uncomfortable throughout, and the resolution involves a degree of chaos and collateral damage that functions as an argument that time travel is indeed as messy and consequence-producing as the show always said it was. It is the show proving its own thesis by finally violating it. Secret number 94. In Morty Night Run, a character named Roy appears in the B-plot when Morty plays an immersive virtual reality game at Blips and Chits, a space arcade. The game is called Roy, A Life Well Lived, and Morty plays the entire life of a fictional man named Roy, including mundane decades working at a carpet store and surviving cancer. When Morty is pulled out of the game before Roy's natural death, he is devastated at leaving Roy's life unfinished. The segment is a complete condensed meditation on mortality, meaning, and the attachment we form to lives we inhabit even briefly, and it occupies maybe 5 minutes of screen time. Secret number 95. The Season 3 episode The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy focuses almost entirely on Rick and Jerry, two characters who are typically defined by their mutual contempt. The episode is, in essence, a forced buddy road trip during which both characters are required to be honest with each other in ways they are uncomfortable with, and both emerge from the experience having expressed vulnerabilities they would normally never reveal. In the background of the episode's post-credits scene, a pattern that looks like a low-contrast graffiti of Bill Cipher from Gravity Falls can be seen on a bridge support. Secret number 96. The Season 4 Episode 1 Crew Over the Cuckoo's Morty is a heist movie parody in which the twist is that Rick orchestrated the entire convoluted heist, specifically to prove to Morty that heist plots are fundamentally stupid. The episode is Rick using an elaborate mechanism to make a point about narrative convention. When the show's writers give Rick long speeches about why certain storytelling tropes are bad, the effect is simultaneously satisfying as comedy and slightly uncomfortable as self-reflection, because Rick's criticisms of lazy storytelling are criticisms the show's audience has sometimes leveled at the show itself. Secret number 97. The character of Tammy, who initially appears as Summer's high school friend and eventually reveals herself as a Galactic Federation agent, was voiced by Cassie Steele throughout the show's run, from her earliest appearances as a relatively ordinary teenage character through her eventual arc as a major antagonist. The consistency of casting across what amounts to an enormous character transformation is intentional. The voice carries the continuity of the character even as her role in the story completely changes. Secret number 98, The Vindicators, the superhero team that appears in Vindicators 3. The Return of World Ender are a parody of the Avengers and similar ensemble superhero teams. The joke is that Rick and Morty are only brought in for the third adventure with the group, having been deemed unnecessary for the first two because those adventures were resolved without requiring Rick's genius. Rick's resentment at being treated as a last resort rather than a permanent team member drives the entire episode. Underneath the parody is a genuine exploration of how deeply Rick needs to be needed. Secret number 99. In that same episode, Rick drunkenly programs the Vindicators' headquarters with a series of Saw-style death traps while blacked out, and the riddles embedded in those traps reveal that Rick's supposedly nihilistic worldview contains a very specific and personal resentment of Morty's hero worship of the Vindicators. Drunk Rick has set up puzzles designed to destroy the heroes Morty admires, replacing that admiration with the truth of their mediocrity. Because sober Rick cannot simply say, "I want you to look up to me the way you look up to them." Secret number 100, Season 4's Prometheus episode, in which Rick and Morty are discovered to have been controlled by alien facehuggers for an undetermined amount of time, inverts the typical adventure structure by starting at the end, with Rick and Morty escaping and working backward to explain how they ended up there. The episode uses this reversed structure as both a formal experiment and a thematic statement about how much of our lives is spent on autopilot, performing actions we have not consciously chosen, and only understanding them in retrospect. Secret number 101. In Season 3's Pickle Rick, the Russian criminals that Rick fights through a building are depicted with a specificity and attention to detail that suggests the animators did genuine research into the specific visual language of that type of thriller action film. The sequence is essentially a parody of the John Wick franchise, Kingsman, and similar hyper-violent European action films, executed with enough commitment to the visual grammar of the genre that it works both as comedy and as a surprisingly competent action sequence. Secret number 102. The show's treatment of consciousness and identity becomes progressively more complex across the seasons. By Season 4 and 5, the show has established that Rick has transferred his consciousness multiple times, inhabited cloned bodies, and modified his own biology so extensively that the question of which Rick is continuous with Rick C-137 has become genuinely philosophical. When Rick in a later season refers to himself as basically Inspector Gadget because of how many cybernetic modifications he has undergone, he is acknowledging that physical continuity is no longer a reliable marker of identity. Secret number 103. The fourth season finale, Star-Mort Return of the Jerry, ends with a scene where both versions of Beth, the Earth Beth and Space Beth, are sitting together with Rick and asking him whether he knows which one is the original. Rick tells them no. Many fans initially took this at face value, but subsequent supplemental material and commentary from the writers has suggested that Rick likely does know and is choosing not to tell them. Because knowing would remove the narrative possibility of having two Beths in the universe and would force a moral reckoning he is not ready for. Secret number 104. The character of Mr. Nimbus, the undersea king who appears in the Season 5 premiere, is introduced as Rick's nemesis and former rival. His powers include controlling the police and apparently being very attractive. He is depicted as having known Rick for decades and is one of the few characters who speaks to Rick with both familiarity and genuine authority. He refers to Diane by name. This single detail, the casual mention of Rick's dead wife in the context of a decades-long rivalry, implies a shared history that the show has not yet fully explored. Secret number 105. In the background of several Season 4 and 5 episodes, a poster for a band called The Flesh Curtains can be seen in Morty's school. This is a reference to a detail established in later seasons, that Rick, Birdperson, and Squanchy were once in a band together called The Flesh Curtains, which apparently toured and had enough local notoriety to produce merchandise. The poster in Morty's school predates the canon reveal by multiple seasons. Either the animators included it as a piece of world building that the writers subsequently developed into a canonical plot point, or it was always planned and was waiting for the right moment. Section 5. The mythology deepens. Secrets from seasons 5 and 6. The room is quieter now. The constellations of hidden detail are becoming more intricate, more interconnected. Each secret sits within a web of other secrets. Secret number 106. At the season 5 finale, Rick Mirai Jack, is the episode where the show finally commits fully to its own mythology. What had been hinted at in season 3, shown briefly, and then walked back, is confirmed. Rick's backstory, the bombing of his garage, the deaths of his wife Diane and his daughter Beth, at the hands of another Rick, is real. It happened. Rick's story of a life defined by a catastrophic loss that he channeled into a decades-long revenge quest is not a fabrication. This confirmation reframes the entire first 5 seasons of the show retroactively, because everything Rick has done, every evasion, every cruelty, every moment of unexpected tenderness, now sits against the backdrop of that loss. Secret number 107. The same episode reveals that Rick C-137, our Rick, was instrumental in creating both the Citadel of Ricks and the Central Finite Curve, the barrier that separates the dimensions where Rick is the smartest person alive from the infinite dimensions where he is not. The show suggests but does not fully confirm whether Rick built the curve to narrow down the dimensions where the Rick who killed his family might be hiding. Evil Morty has to scan Rick's brain to understand how to break the curve, which implies that Rick's mind contains the architectural secret to that barrier, and by extension, that Rick essentially built his own prison. Secret number 108. In Rick-ternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, Rick enters Bird Person's mind to try to free him from Phoenix Person's programming. Inside Bird Person's mind, Rick encounters a memory version of his younger self, and before the loss of Diane, before the decades of bitterness. The younger Rick is dismissive of the older Rick, calling him a disappointment and questioning why he has settled for living with a family he keeps at arm's length. The older Rick cannot fully defend himself against the younger Rick's criticism, because the younger Rick is not wrong. It is the show's most explicit examination of the question of what Rick gave up to become who he is. Secret number 109. The Season 6 premiere, Solarix, resets the portal fluid of every Rick who uses standard portal guns, sending them back to their native dimensions. This act sends Rick C-137 back to his home dimension, Dimension C-137, where he built the portal gun and where Diane and Beth were killed. In that dimension, Rick had created an artificial intelligence version of Diane, designed to keep haunting him by always sounding as though she is calling from the next room. He had built her to sustain his own guilt and drive him forward. When he finds her again, she is still calling. He tells her it is time to move on. She tells him that because of the portal fluid reset, Rick Prime has also been sent back to his original dimension, and the hunt can begin again. Secret number 110. The Diane AI in Rick's home dimension is one of the show's most quietly devastating details. A man who has the technological capacity to build or simulate almost anything has chosen to build a perpetual reminder of his greatest failure. He could have built a simulation of Diane to keep him company, instead, and he built one that only calls to him from a room he cannot quite reach. This is a man engineering his own suffering with the most sophisticated tools in the universe. Secret number 111. The Season 6 episode, Bethic Twinstinct, explores the relationship between Beth and Space Beth and allows it to develop into something romantic, which the show treats with considerable delicacy. The episode is structured around the question of whether two versions of the same person can be meaningfully different, and whether the differences that have emerged between them over years of separate experience constitute genuine individuality. It is one of the few episodes that is almost entirely about characters processing their own complexity without any external adventure framework. Secret number 112. On the Season 6 episode, Jurassic Mort features the arrival of dinosaurs, fully intelligent and peaceable, who offer to solve all of Earth's problems. Rick refuses to trust them on principle. The episode is partly a commentary on the reflexive distrust of seemingly benevolent interventions, and partly a story about Rick's inability to accept help, even when it is offered freely. The dinosaurs, in their calm competence, represent everything Rick wishes he could be without the emotional damage. Secret number 113 in Season 6. There are several small moments of continuity that reward longtime viewers. The crack in the Smith family's driveway, visible since the Season 1 finale, is still there. Small physical details of the house's interior, damages accumulated across 5 previous seasons, remain visible. While the show is maintaining a continuous physical record of the family's history through background art that the vast majority of viewers will never notice. Secret number 114. Unmortrican, the 5th episode of Season 7, is the episode where Rick finally finds and kills Rick Prime. It is structured partly as an action thriller and partly as an existential reckoning. Rick and evil Morty form an unlikely alliance to track down their shared enemy. When they find him, the fight is brutal and personal in ways that few Rick and Morty action sequences manage to be. Rick kills Rick Prime by hand, slowly, in a way that clearly costs him something, and then sits with the aftermath, which is a profound emptiness. He had built his entire identity around the hunt. Now the hunt is over, and there is nothing left inside it. Secret number 115. Unmortrican reveals that Rick Prime, using a device he calls the Omega device, erased every version of Diane from every dimension in the multiverse. This explains something fans had quietly noted for years without having an explanation for it. In every dimension Rick and Morty visit, every version of every family member is present except Diane. There are Beths everywhere, Jerrys everywhere, Summers everywhere, but no Dianes, because Rick Prime made it so. He did not merely take Diane from Rick, he took Diane from existence itself. Secret number 116. After killing Rick Prime, Rick briefly becomes depressed in a way the show depicts with honesty. Achieving the thing you have oriented your entire life around for decades removes the structure that gave your life direction. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon in real human experience. The show treats Rick's post-victory emptiness with the same seriousness it brings to grief. Secret number 117, the 7th season, also features the return of Space Beth, now a wanted criminal being hunted by the Galactic Federation. Her story arc in Season 7 develops her as a character in her own right, separate from Earth Beth's story, and gives her a moral complexity that her earlier appearances did not fully explore. By the end of Season 7, the show has established 2 genuinely distinct characters who happen to share an origin. Secret number 118, the Season 7 episode. Wet Quat A Mortican Summer is an homage to summer camp movies and coming-of-age films, set in a galactic summer camp for alien children. It is one of the few episodes that focuses primarily on Summer rather than on Rick or Morty, and it allows Spencer Grammer to do the most interesting work the character has had since the earlier seasons. Summer has evolved considerably from the shallow teenager of the first season, and episodes like this one make that evolution feel earned. Secret number 119? The Season 6 episode, Analyze Piss, features Rick doing reluctant superhero mentoring work, addressing the problems of minor antagonists who are bothering the population. It is structured as a satire of superhero media and the often ludicrous specificity of villain motivations in that genre. But embedded within the comedy is a genuine observation about Rick. He is willing to help people he does not respect more easily than he is willing to help people he does. On it because helping someone he looks down on does not require him to be vulnerable. Secret number 120, the Season 5 episode A Mortican Grickfitty, which involves Rick and Jerry forming a strange friendship with a group of Hellraiser-style demons who feed on human suffering, is one of the show's most effective explorations of the Jerry character. Jerry, who is typically positioned as the least impressive person in any room, turns out to be exactly what the demons are looking for. Not because he is remarkable, but because his specific kind of mundane dissatisfaction is a delicacy in their particular ecosystem. Jerry is the best at being the worst version of himself, and that specificity turns out to be its own kind of value. Secret number 121. And the Season 6 episode Solarix establishes definitively that Morty C-137 died in the Cronenberg dimension that Rick and Morty abandoned at the end of Rick Potion number 9. The Morty that has been traveling with Rick from that point forward is not C-137 Morty, but rather the Morty of whatever dimension Rick has settled in. This means that the Morty we have been following since Season 1, Episode 6, the the Morty who has grown and changed and become increasingly capable, is technically not the original Morty. The show makes this revelation quietly and without extensive commentary. Secret number 122. Rick has a fondness for a brand of beer in the show called Calaxian crystals, which are depicted as psychedelic alien substances in earlier episodes and later in the background as regular domestic items. The presence of alien intoxicants among ordinary household items is a recurring visual joke that suggests Rick has been systematically normalizing the extraordinary within the domestic space. Secret number 123. The sixth season's mid-season finale, Rictional Mortpoon's Rickmas Mortcation, while ostensibly a Christmas episode, contains a meta-commentary through Rick directly addressing the audience about the show's relationship to serialized storytelling. Rick says out loud that he has been resetting the storytelling machinery and that continuity is being shelved. This is Dan Harmon directly telling the audience that the show will be taking a break from its canon-building mode and returning to more episodic adventures. Rick speaking the writer's intentions aloud within the fiction is one of the show's most unusual structural choices. Secret number 124. The Season 6 episode Night Family involves Rick creating a sleep version of himself and the family who complete tasks while the conscious versions sleep, which eventually leads to the sleep selves developing autonomous goals and preferences. The episode is about automation, labor, and the strange philosophical implications of outsourcing your own activity to a version of yourself you have no awareness of. It is also, beneath the comedy, a meditation on the parts of ourselves we are not conscious of directing. Secret number 125. The Season 5 episode Mort Dinner. Rick Andre establishes the character of Mr. Nimbus as genuinely ancient, as someone who has known Rick across significant portions of both their lives. The episode's structure involves Morty running a dinner party in real time while centuries pass for the characters at a scale-distorted dimension. The contrast between domestic anxiety in the present and vast stretches of time in the background creates a vertigo that is specific to the show's particular kind of comedy. Section 6, New Voices and New Directions. Seasons 7 and 8. Still with me. The night is long and the show has more to offer. Let these last secrets drift in like stars appearing as the sky fully darkens. Secret number 126. The seventh season of Rick and Morty arrived with two new voices in the titular roles, Ian Cardoni as Rick Sanchez and Harry Belden as Morty Smith. Much of the casting process to find these actors involved auditions from thousands of candidates over a period of 6 months. The production team heard more submissions than they could count, narrowing the field through multiple rounds of increasingly specific tests. Both Cardoni and Belden auditioned for both roles. Belden thought his Rick impression was stronger than his Morty impression. Cardoni thought his Morty was improving through the process. The production team correctly assessed that each actor was stronger in the opposite direction from what the actors themselves believed. Secret number 127. Ian Cardoni is from Boston and had done significant voiceover work before landing the role of Rick, including building an impression reel that featured Rick among other characters. He had also, in one of the more unexpected details in the entire casting story, served as an announcer for WrestleMania. Harry Belden is from Chicago and had done background work on shows like Chicago Med and Joe Pera. Talks with you. Both men were, by any conventional measure, unknowns, who emerged from relative obscurity to take on one of the most scrutinized voice acting jobs in contemporary television. Secret number 128. During the audition process, the producers deliberately separated Cardoni and Belden, keeping them from meeting or communicating, partly to maintain secrecy and partly, according to producer Steve Levy, just to drive each other crazy. When Belden finally met Cardoni partway through the recording of Season 7, he described it as meeting someone he already knew, because he had heard so much about him and had eavesdropped on some of Cardoni's recorded lines during sessions. Secret number 129. The producers brought in a vocal coach to work with both actors even before they were formally cast, which both Cardoni and Belden described as an unusual and genuinely generous gesture. Having a vocal coach available during the audition process signaled that the production team was invested in the actors' well-being and was not simply extracting performances but actively supporting the actors in maintaining and developing their voices safely over a sustained process. Secret number 130. Dan Harmon has acknowledged publicly that the Season 7 writing process felt different from any previous season, partly because of the turbulence of the previous years, and partly because of the influx of newer writers who brought a fresh perspective. He specifically cited Albro Lundy and James Siciliano, who wrote the Season 7 episode Unmortrican, as examples of writers whose enthusiasm for the show's mythology helped recharge Harmon's own engagement with it. The Season 7 episode That's a Morte, written by Heather Ann Campbell, has been widely praised as one of the show's best episodes, and was specifically cited by showrunner Scott Marder as evidence of the show's creative health. Secret number 131. When Season 7 premiered, Adult Swim made the unusual decision to keep the identities of the new voice actors secret until the night of broadcast. Screeners were distributed without end credits, and the network even walked back an earlier promise to reveal the actors' names under embargo before the premiere. The result was an unprecedented level of suspense around a piece of casting information that turned out, for most viewers, to be far less disruptive than feared. The voices were different enough to notice, but similar enough to accept, and most fans reported settling into the new voices within the first episode. Secret number 132. One commonly noted difference between the old and new versions of Rick is the reduced frequency of Rick's characteristic mid-sentence burping. Justin Roiland's Rick incorporated burps into his speech as a nearly involuntary tick, something that punctuated his dialogue with a specific kind of messy, barely controlled energy. Ian Cardoni's Rick does burp, but less often and more deliberately. Whether this will change as Cardoni grows more comfortable in the role, or whether this is an intentional refinement, remains to be seen. Secret number 133. Season 7's continuity is notably tighter than several of the preceding seasons, with callbacks to earlier episodes woven throughout the 10-episode run. The season feels like a payoff season, collecting on investments made across the previous 6 years, from the Rick Prime storyline to the ongoing evolution of Evil Morty to the deepening of Rick's emotional relationship with his family. The new showrunner Scott Marder and the writers clearly wanted to make a season that rewarded long-term viewers while also being accessible as entertainment. Secret number 134. Season 8 premiered on May 25th, 2025, on Adult Swim. The season contains 10 episodes and continues the storytelling approach established in Seasons 6 and 7, balancing episodic adventures with ongoing canonical development. The Season 8 finale, Hot Rick, involves Rick attempting to come to terms with memories of Diane through a storyline involving a memory Rick figure, and its post-credits scene sets up a mystery involving Space Beth and alternate realities that points toward future seasons. Secret number 135. In October 2024, Adult Swim announced the renewal of Rick and Morty through Season 12, adding 20 more episodes beyond the previously contracted amount. This means the show is committed to at least 4 more seasons of storytelling beyond the current 8th season, and could potentially reach 12 seasons, which would make it one of the longest-running adult animated series in American television history. The Simpsons-style longevity that Dan Harmon once described as a dream for the show is beginning to look not just possible, but likely. Secret number 136. The Season 8 episode Valkyrie deals with a topic that the show has been building toward quietly across multiple seasons. What does Rick do now that his primary narrative purpose, the hunt for Rick Prime, has been accomplished? The episode explores Rick attempting to construct a new identity and a new purpose without the organizing force of vengeance to drive him. This is one of the most mature storytelling challenges the show has ever taken on, and the Season 8 writers handle it with considerable care. Secret number 137. On Season 8's No Mortland episode, which features Jerry making an unusual friendship with another unemployed character, has been noted by critics as one of the best Jerry-focused episodes in the show's history. Jerry episodes succeed when they find the genuine warmth and unexpected capability that the character contains beneath his failures. And this episode, according to audience ratings, does that more effectively than almost any previous Jerry story. Secret number 138. The Season 8 premiere, Summer of All Fears, is the first season premiere to give Summer the primary storyline since the much earlier Season 2 episode Morty Night Run. It signals a renewed commitment to developing Summer as a full character, rather than a recurring participant in other characters' stories. Secret number 139. The Last Temptation of Jerry, the fourth episode of Season 8, features Easter Island and a giant rabbit creature, both of which were visible in teaser material released months before the season aired. The episode is structured around the Smith family discovering something dark and strange about the holiday of Easter in the show's universe, which characteristically involves alien intervention and a conspiracy that has been operating in plain sight for thousands of years. Secret number 140. Season 8's Cryomort. A Rickver involves Rick and Morty attempting to rob a ship of sleeping passengers. The episode is a heist story with a specific structural twist that several critics have described as one of the show's more inventive formal experiments of the season. But the cryosleep premise allows for a particular kind of temporal disorientation that the episode uses to keep the audience off balance in ways that serve both the comedy and the eventual emotional payoff. Section 7. The Real Science. What Rick and Morty got right. Here is where the show becomes something stranger than fiction, because some of what it depicts is not as far from real science as you might think. Secret number 141. The multiverse concept at the heart of Rick and Morty is grounded in actual theoretical physics. The many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957, holds that every quantum event with multiple possible outcomes produces a branching of reality in which all outcomes occur simultaneously in different versions of the universe. This is not science fiction. This is a legitimate interpretation of quantum mechanics that a significant number of physicists take seriously, though it remains unproven and contested. Rick's ability to travel between these branches is the fictional extrapolation. The existence of the branches themselves is theoretical physics. Secret number 142. The portal gun, Rick's primary tool for interdimensional travel, has been analyzed by actual physicists who describe it as essentially creating stabilized wormholes. A wormhole is a theoretical structure in which two distant points in space-time are connected through a tunnel that allows travel between them without crossing the intervening distance. Physicist Kevork Abazadyan, the director of the Center for Cosmology at UC Irvine, has analyzed the show's portal gun and suggested that the green fluid likely functions as a form of exotic matter, a hypothetical substance with the unusual property of negative energy density that would be required to stabilize a wormhole against collapse. Secret number 143. The reason Rick gives for never using time travel, that it creates impossible causality problems, is scientifically sound. General relativity does produce certain solutions that would allow for time travel through structures called closed time-like curves. But the paradoxes these structures generate, including the grandfather paradox and its variants, are genuine unresolved problems in theoretical physics. Physicist Stephen Hawking proposed what he called the chronology protection conjecture, the idea that the laws of physics conspire to prevent time travel at the macroscopic level, which is essentially the same position the show takes through Rick's disdain for temporal mechanics. Secret number 144. The episode A Wrinkle in Time uses the quantum mechanics concept of superposition as its central premise. The idea that observing a quantum system collapses its wave function, forcing it from a state of multiple simultaneous possibilities into a single determined outcome, is one of the most genuinely strange and well-established principles in physics. The episode externalizes this as time branching every time a decision is made, or a new observation collapses a situation, producing exponentially multiplying timelines. While the scale is wildly exaggerated, the underlying concept is real. Secret number 145. Rick's portal gun formula, visible on whiteboards and notes in the show, contains elements recognizable to physics students. While the complete formula is fictional, it incorporates genuine mathematical notation and concepts from quantum field theory in ways that have led multiple physics educators to note that the show's scientific background art was clearly created with at least some reference to real physics, rather than being purely invented nonsense. Secret number 146. The microverse battery, which appears in the Season 2 episode The Ricks Must Be Crazy, involves Rick having created an entire miniature universe containing intelligent life, whose civilization unknowingly generates power for Rick's ship by running on wheels that produce the energy Rick needs. This is essentially a thought experiment about the Fermi paradox and about energy extraction at civilization scales. The concept draws on real physics related to the Kardashev scale, a theoretical measure of civilizational advancement based on energy consumption. Rick's microverse is a Type 3 civilization, being exploited by a being who is effectively Type 4. Secret number 147. The show's treatment of consciousness and identity, particularly its exploration of what happens when Rick transfers his mind into different bodies, engages with real philosophical debates about personal identity. Derek Parfit's work on personal identity, specifically his argument that what we value about continuity is not some irreducible essence, but rather the psychological connections between mental states over time, is directly relevant to storylines about Rick moving between bodies, Rick duplicating himself, and Rick encountering past versions of himself in memory spaces. Secret number 148. The episode in which Rick shrinks himself and Morty down to enter the body of a homeless man named Ruben, where Rick has built a theme park called Anatomy Park, raises real scientific problems. Physicists and science communicators who have analyzed the episode note that at sufficiently small scales, Rick and Morty would be killed by the physical forces that make biochemistry work at normal scales. Hemoglobin molecules would be too large to carry oxygen relative to their shrunken bodies. The conservation of mass would require that their mass go somewhere when they shrink. These are genuine objections that the show cheerfully waves past. Secret number 149. The Pickle Rick episode, despite its comic premise, engages surprisingly seriously with questions about invertebrate neurology. When Rick controls a cockroach using his tongue, the episode is depicting real neurological concepts. Cockroach locomotion and the neural ganglia that control it have been subjects of actual research, and the idea of hijacking those control systems with an external signal is not purely fantastical. Rick's improvised cockroach cybernetics are a comic exaggeration of real insect neuroscience. Secret number 150. The central finite curve, revealed in the Season 5 finale as a barrier separating the infinite multiverse into a subsection where Rick is always the smartest person in the room, has been analyzed by physics and philosophy commentators as one of the show's most conceptually interesting inventions. The idea of deliberately restricting access to reality to only those realities where a particular condition is always true is a kind of anthropic principle applied as a weapon. In cosmology, the anthropic principle is the observation that the physical constants of our universe are the ones compatible with intelligent life, because if they were different, there would be nobody here to observe them. The central finite curve is the anthropic principle weaponized by ego. Secret number 151. The Season 1 episode, Rick Potion number 9, engages with concepts from evolutionary biology. When Rick's love potion, which he designed to exploit praying mantis pheromones to make Morty irresistible, it mutates across the human population through interaction with a flu virus, the mechanism is biologically grounded. Horizontal gene transfer, the process by which genetic material passes between organisms other than through reproduction, is a real biological phenomenon most commonly associated with bacteria. The episode imagines this process operating at an accelerated and grotesquely mutated scale. Secret number 152. The episode Total Recall is a thought experiment about the limits of epistemological trust, specifically the question of how you distinguish genuine memories from fabricated ones. This is not purely a philosophical abstraction. Research on memory and cognitive psychology has established that human memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive. That's meaning we literally rebuild memories each time we recall them, and each rebuilding can introduce alterations. The parasites in the episode are essentially exploiting a vulnerability that actual human memory architecture possesses. Secret number 153. Physicist Sean Carroll, one of the most prominent advocates for the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, has spoken positively about Rick and Morty's engagement with multiverse theory. Carroll has argued that parallel worlds are not science fiction, imagination, but mathematical necessities within the equations of quantum mechanics, and has cited the show as a reasonably responsible popularization of these ideas. Given that it makes the concepts feel intuitive and relevant rather than dry and abstract, Secret number 154. On the Season 2 episode Autoerotic Assimilation, features a hive mind entity called Unity that has absorbed most of the population of a planet. Hive mind concepts in science fiction are often depicted as straightforwardly dystopian, the loss of individual identity into a collective as a kind of death. Rick and Morty treats Unity's nature with more complexity, depicting her as someone capable of genuine connection and genuine pain, and Rick's relationship with her as his most honest romantic relationship of the series, precisely because Unity cannot perform emotions she does not feel. The breakup at the end of the episode is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the show's run. Secret number 155. The concept of quantum immortality, which occasionally appears in fan theories about Rick, and is a real and controversial thought experiment in physics. The argument holds that since, according to the many worlds interpretation, all possible outcomes of quantum events occur simultaneously in different branches of reality, any event that could kill you will also have a branch in which you survive. From the perspective of your subjective experience, you will always find yourself in the branch where you lived, because the branches where you died contain no subjective experience to be accounted for. The implication is a kind of immortality from the inside, even as you die in countless other branches. Rick's apparent ability to survive impossible situations could be seen as a narrative expression of this concept. Secret number 156. The show's depiction of the Galactic Federation as a bureaucratic, self-interested organization that imposes its authority through violence and surveillance rather than genuine cooperation has been noted as a fairly direct allegory for various real-world international institutions. The writers have been careful not to identify the Federation with any single real-world analog, but the critique of technocratic authority that believes its own legitimacy is inherent rather than earned runs through much of the show's political satire. Secret number 157. Dan Harmon has spoken in interviews about his genuine fascination with quantum physics as an idea system, noting that its implications for questions of identity, free will, and the nature of reality are as interesting to him as any philosophical tradition. He has described the show as, in part, that his attempt to use science fiction as a way of working through questions about consciousness and meaning that he cannot answer through conventional philosophy. This gives the show's science a quality of emotional investment that distinguishes it from shows that use scientific concepts purely as set decoration. Secret number 158. The show's treatment of artificial intelligence, which appears in various forms including Beth's horse surgeon career's robotic competition, the various robotic helpers Rick has built, and the Diane AI, consistently explores the boundary between authentic consciousness and simulation. Rick's ability to build convincingly sentient machines raises the question of whether the consciousness of those machines is less real than biological consciousness, and in the show typically leaves this question open rather than resolving it in either direction. Secret number 159. The concept of the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our reality is a computational simulation created by a more advanced civilization, appears in the show through the micro-universe storyline and in various throwaway references. When a character within the show creates beings who generate power for that character's purposes, those beings are in exactly the situation the simulation hypothesis describes for us. The show uses comedy to make this philosophical horror bearable. Secret number 160. Rick's garage, which functions as both a domestic space and a scientific laboratory, is a visual symbol of the show's central tension between the extraordinary and the ordinary. The garage contains objects that could end civilizations, sitting on shelves next to motor oil and Christmas decorations. The juxtaposition is both funny and philosophically pointed. When the most advanced technology in the universe lives next to a box of holiday lights, it suggests something about the relationship between power and purpose, about what happens when extraordinary capability is housed within ordinary life. Section 8. The Soul of the Smith Family. Character Secrets and Lore Mysteries. We are in the deeper waters now. Let your breathing slow. These are the mysteries that the show has been building since the beginning. Secret number 161. Rick C-137 is not the original Rick from Dimension C-137. He is a Rick from an unspecified dimension who, after the loss of his Diane and Beth, had spent decades traveling through the multiverse hunting the Rick responsible, eventually settling in Dimension C-137 after that dimension's Rick died. The family he lives with, Beth, Jerry, Summer, and eventually Morty, is not his original family. He has adopted them without telling them, because the alternative was continuing to drift through an infinite universe with nothing to connect him to. Secret number 162. This means that the Morty who has been Rick's companion throughout the show is not biologically related to Rick. Their relationship, which the show treats with real tenderness underneath all the abuse and danger, is a chosen relationship rather than a biological one. Rick chose to invest in this Morty, to protect him, to teach him, to drag him through adventures, and then feel guilty about it. Now, the grandfather-grandson dynamic that anchors the entire show is built on a choice rather than blood. Secret number 163. Beth Smith is aware, on some level, that she was abandoned by her father at a very young age. She is not aware that the Rick who came back is not her original Rick. The show treats this as a secret Rick carries alone, and it adds a particular ache to scenes where Beth expresses how much she needs her father's approval. She is seeking validation from someone who is not even the man who left her, but who is close enough to that man that the emotional need is real regardless. Secret number 164. Evil Morty's departure through the central finite curve is an exit into a part of the multiverse where, by definition, Rick is not the smartest person alive. What that world looks like is entirely unknown. Evil Morty chose freedom over familiarity, the unknown over a rigged game. Whether he thrives in that unknown space, whether he finds what he was looking for, whether he becomes something entirely new, the show has not yet addressed and may never address. He left. And the open door he left through is one of the most intriguing loose ends in the show's mythology. Secret number 165. Jerry's most significant character moment across the entire series is the moment in Season 2 when he forced Beth to choose between him and Rick, and Beth chose Jerry and Rick had to leave the house. This happened while Jerry was, by any external measure, at his lowest point emotionally. And he achieved the most significant victory of his character arc, not through growth or competence, but through the raw leverage of being the person Beth had chosen to build her life with. Jerry's power in the family is not intellectual or physical. It is relational. He is Beth's husband, and that matters to her in ways she does not fully understand herself. Secret number 166. Summer's need to be seen and validated is directly connected to the episode where she discovers she was an unplanned pregnancy. The show reveals this through a moment where Summer and Morty are looking at alternate realities in which their parents had much better lives without children. The revelation that her parents almost did not have her, that her existence was a choice that was almost not made, that explains the particular texture of Summer's insecurity. It is not general teenage anxiety. It is the specific anxiety of someone who has been told, by the universe itself, that she was not certain. Secret number 167. The character of Beth Smith has dark implications that the show has raised and set aside multiple times without full resolution. Rick built her weaponized toys as a child because she asked for them, and the show has implied that there were incidents in Beth's childhood involving those toys and other children that were quietly managed rather than publicly acknowledged. Beth's stability as an adult is presented as a careful performance, and the show has suggested that without Rick there to provide a model for channeling extreme intelligence into destructive creativity, Beth might have developed differently. How much darker, the show has not quite committed to saying. Secret number 168. Morty's evolution across the show's run, from a terrified, stammering boy who could barely hold his own in ordinary social situations to someone increasingly capable of violence, tactical thinking, and moral detachment, is one of the most carefully tracked character developments in the series. The show treats this evolution not as growth, but as damage accumulation. Every adventure leaves a mark. Every time Morty handles a situation that should traumatize him without being traumatized, the show frames it as something being lost rather than gained. Secret number 169. Morty's Mind Blowers reveals that Morty has been erasing his own memories since the early seasons. and that the volume of material he has had removed is staggering. The room where those memories are stored is enormous, filled with vials of experience that collectively represent a second, darker version of Morty's life, one that runs parallel to the Morty we see but is hidden from him. The Morty we know is to an unknown extent an edited version of the actual experience. Secret number 170. The season 6 finale establishes that Rick has begun moving away from the revenge quest that defined him and towards something like genuine presence in his family. He spent decades at war with the multiverse on behalf of his dead wife and daughter. He is beginning very slowly to let that war end. What he becomes without it is the question that the show's post-season 6 storytelling is slowly addressing. Should the answer is not simple and is not yet complete. Secret number 171. The relationship between Rick and Bird Person contains a detail that illuminates Rick's character in an unexpected way. Rick is willing to make a fool of himself around Bird Person in ways he would never tolerate around anyone else. At the wedding, at various parties, in memory sequences, Rick is shown being genuinely playful and occasionally vulnerable around his oldest friend. Bird Person is the person Rick is when he is not protecting himself. The devastation of losing him to Phoenix Person is so great precisely because Bird Person represented the last remaining witness to who Rick was before he became who he is. Secret number 172. Much of the show has depicted Rick as having had multiple significant romantic relationships across the years, each of which ended badly. Unity left him because being with Rick caused her to lose her individuality, which is an extraordinary statement about what it means to be emotionally close to someone that powerful. Jessica, Morty's long-standing crush, represents the show's exploration of what ordinary adolescent desire looks like when it exists within an extraordinary life. Morty's feelings for her are real and persistent, and the show's occasional checking in on that relationship grounds him in normal human experience. Secret number 173. Rick's alcoholism is treated seriously across the entire show's run, never fully as a punchline. The drinking is clearly self-medication. It dulls the pain of grief, prevents the kind of genuine introspection that might lead to actual change, and keeps Rick in the specific emotional register he has occupied for decades. Dr. Wong's speech in Pickle Rick is the show's most direct engagement with this, but the drinking is always there in the background, as something the show takes seriously even when the plot does not address it directly. Secret number 174. The character of Mr. Poopy Butthole has been the subject of considerable fan analysis regarding his ultimate nature within the show's mythology. Some theorists have suggested that his entire function, his awareness of the camera, his direct address to the audience, his unremarked survival across seasons, is evidence that he exists on a different metaphysical level than the other characters. Yet he may not be subject to the same rules of the Rick and Morty universe. He may be, in some sense, aware that he is in a television show. The show has never confirmed this, but has never denied it either. Secret number 175. The recurring character of the President of the United States, voiced by Keith David, is modeled on no specific real president, but is depicted as a man who is simultaneously aware of the bizarre reality he occupies and determined to maintain the dignity of his office within it. He is, in many ways, the most psychologically healthy person in the show's recurring cast. He experiences extraordinary events, processes them rationally, maintains appropriate emotional responses, and does not allow his sense of self to be destabilized by them. The show presents this as both admirable and slightly comic. Secret number 176. The show's treatment of death is significantly more matter-of-fact than most comparable media. Characters die constantly, are replaced by alternate versions, die again, are replaced again. The show has killed Rick himself multiple times, had him transfer his consciousness to new bodies, and continued as though nothing particularly unusual occurred. This attitude toward death is partly comedic and partly a genuine philosophical position about identity and continuity, and the show uses it to say things about impermanence that more conventionally mortality-anxious shows cannot. Secret number 177. The Gazorpians, the aggressive alien species from the episode Raising Gazorpazorp, have a matriarchal society in which the males are kept separate and allowed only to breed. This is depicted as a social response to the extreme violence and simplicity of the male Gazorpians, whose behavior, when unsupervised, is uniformly destructive. The episode uses science fiction to explore gender dynamics in a way that is neither purely satirical nor purely earnest, sitting in a comic zone that leaves the interpretation somewhat open. Secret number 178. The two Beths created after Season 4, Earth Beth and Space Beth, represent the show's most extended meditation on the question of self-determination. Earth Beth stayed in the suburban life because she chose to, or because she did not choose fast enough to change it. Space Beth left because she did, or because she was the version who received the opportunity first. Neither can fully know which is which, and the show argues, through the arc of their relationship in seasons 6 and 7, that this uncertainty does not diminish either of them. You are who you choose to be after the original choice, not who you were before it. Secret number 179. Rick's relationship with his own genius is complicated by the fact that, within the show's mythology, genius is almost universal among Ricks. There are thousands of versions of Rick across the multiverse, all of whom are approximately equally brilliant. The thing that makes Rick C-137 distinctive is not his intelligence, but his experience, his specific history of loss and adaptation and choice. His genius is shared. His story is his own. The Citadel, which treats Rickness as an inherent identity category based on intelligence, misses this entirely. Secret number 180. Thus, the recurring character of Summer's friend Tammy, who is ultimately revealed as a Galactic Federation agent, retroactively adds a surveillance dimension to the entire first season of the show. Every scene she was in, every seemingly ordinary teenage interaction, was colored by her true purpose. This reframing suggests that the ordinary world Rick and Morty keep coming home to was already compromised from the beginning, that even the most quotidian parts of their lives were being observed and potentially manipulated by forces they did not know were there. Secret number 181. The show's post-credits scenes have occasionally contained story information of genuine significance. The post-credits scene of Solarix, the 6th season premiere, where Rick Prime is depicted taunting Rick C-137 from his space station, had established the key dynamic of that season's arc before the main narrative had even addressed it. Post-credits scenes in Rick and Morty are not afterthoughts. They are sometimes the most important 40 seconds of the episode. Secret number 182. Squanchy's fate after Birdperson's wedding was left deliberately uncertain for multiple seasons. He threw himself into a battle he could not win to allow others to escape. For years, the show left open the question of whether he survived. When he eventually reappears in a later season, the revelation that he is alive is treated as a significant emotional event. His survival was not a foregone conclusion. The show maintained the possibility that it had genuinely killed the character, and the uncertainty of his fate gave every subsequent mention of him an undertone of grief. Secret number 183. The show has occasionally depicted versions of the Smith family from other dimensions who are meaningfully different from the main cast. These alternate versions serve as a way of exploring what the characters might be under different circumstances, while also reinforcing the idea that who they are is not inevitable but is a product of specific choices and specific events. The main cast's flaws and virtues are not their essence. They are the result of living the lives they have lived. Secret number 184. Dan Harmon has described the show as, on one level, a story about a person who has been completely broken by experience and loss trying to care for the people around him without admitting that he cares. This description applies to Rick. But Harmon has also noted that it applies to him personally in certain periods of his life. The emotional authenticity that gives the show its resonance comes from this willingness to use the creator's own experience as source material, transmuted through the specific machinery of science fiction and animation. Secret number 185. The structural ambiguity about whether Rick's displayed emotional growth across the seasons constitutes genuine change or simply better performed avoidance is one of the show's most compelling ongoing questions. He is warmer in Season 7 than he was in Season 1. He is more willing to acknowledge his care for Morty. He has, in certain moments, been capable of genuine sacrifice. Whether these represent actual psychological movement or simply a longer con is a question the show declines to answer definitively, and that refusal is itself meaningful. Section 9. Voices, Performances, and the Craft of Sound. Almost there now. The last secrets are coming in like late-night radio signals, faint but clear. Secret number 186. Chris Parnell, who voices Jerry Smith, is best known for his years as a cast member on Saturday Night Live and for his voice role in Archer. He brings to Jerry a specific quality of earnest dignity that keeps the character from becoming purely contemptible. Jerry's ridiculous moments land harder because Parnell plays them without condescension, as though Jerry genuinely does not know he is ridiculous. And the resulting performance creates a kind of tragic comedy that a less sincere approach would not produce. Secret number 187. Sarah Chalk, who voices Beth Smith, brought to the character a particular quality of controlled tension. A sense of someone always about to say something, she will immediately walk back. This quality is essential to Beth's character, who is constantly approaching the edge of her own self-knowledge and then retreating. Chalk has spoken about the challenge of finding the genuine warmth in Beth amid the resentment and suppressed ambition. And her performance across 8 seasons has been one of the show's most consistently underappreciated elements. Secret number 188. Spencer Grammer, who voices Summer, is the daughter of Kelsey Grammer, is best known for playing Frasier Crane. This family background in comedy acting is not directly acknowledged by the show, but Grammer has discussed in interviews how her understanding of comedic timing and delivery, developed partly through her upbringing, has informed her approach to a character who uses irony and cool detachment as her primary emotional weapons. Secret number 189. The original audition process for the show, before it premiered, involved finding voices for secondary characters that would be distinctive enough to create real personalities without overwhelming the primary dynamic between Rick and Morty. The cast assembled for the supporting roles brought significant television experience. Parnell's timing, Chalk's emotional range, and Grammer's deadpan specificity created a family unit whose chemistry felt genuine from the first episode. Secret number 190. Many of Rick's most memorable lines across the first 6 seasons were improvised. Justin Roiland's improvisational instincts produced a significant volume of material in each recording session, and the editors and writers used the best takes rather than always the scripted versions. This means that some of the most quoted lines in the show's history exist because Roiland said something in the recording booth that the writers had not written, and that thing was funnier than what they had written. The show is, in part, a collaboration between the script and the recording. Secret number 191. Ian Cardone, in speaking about his approach to voicing Rick, has described the character's voice as requiring him to maintain a specific physical configuration in his throat and chest, a gravelly, degraded quality that sounds like the residue of decades of poor choices. He has compared it to the voice of someone who has been everywhere and done everything and survived all of it, in a condition of permanent low-grade deterioration. Getting into that vocal space requires a specific kind of physical commitment that Cardone has described as genuinely demanding over the course of a full recording session. Secret number 192. Harry Belden has spoken about finding Morty's emotional truth as the foundation for the voice rather than the other way around. Where other actors might find the voice first and then build the character within it, Belden works from the inside out. And starting with Morty's specific combination of fear, love, determination, and occasional darkness, and finding the voice as the natural expression of those qualities. This approach gives his Morty a quality of vulnerability that matches what the character has always been at his core. Secret number 193. Dan Harmon's voice performance as Bird Person has been processed and modified in various ways across the seasons to give the character his distinctive resonance, but Harmon's own speech patterns and cadences are audible beneath the processing, particularly in emotional moments. The character's tendency toward earnest, direct statements of feeling, delivered with complete composure, is both a character trait and a reflection of how Harmon communicates in his own podcast and interview appearances. Secret number 194. Carrie Walgren, who voices several recurring female characters in the show, including Jessica, Morty's long-standing romantic interest, is one of the most prolific voice actors in animation. She has also voiced the ship's computer, which is the Diane AI, bringing a specific quality of warmth and distance to a character who is designed to be simultaneously comforting and haunting. The choice to use the same actor for Jessica, an ordinary teenage girl, and the digital ghost of Rick's dead wife is almost certainly unrelated to any narrative connection between those characters, but it creates an interesting acoustic resonance. Secret number 195. The show has employed a number of prominent guest voices across its run, typically for single-episode characters who require a specific quality that a regular cast member cannot supply. Notable guests have included David Cross, Alfred Molina, Kumail Nanjiani, Christian Slater, Matt Walsh, and Susan Sarandon. The casting of Sarandon, specifically as Dr. Wong and Pickle Rick, was intentional. The character needed a voice with authority, calm, and the specific quality of someone who has heard everything and remains unimpressed by all of it. Sarandon delivered that in 3 or 4 scenes that have become some of the most discussed in the show's history. Secret number 196. The sound design of Rick and Morty is one of its most under-discussed creative achievements. Every alien planet, interdimensional space, and advanced technology has a specific audio signature that reinforces its visual character. The portal gun makes a sound that is simultaneously mechanical and organic, a wet electric quality that suggests genuine violation of physical laws. The sounds of the Citadel of Ricks, the ambient noise of hundreds of copies of the same person going about their lives, were designed to create a specific kind of uncanny discomfort that complements the visual strangeness of the setting. Secret number 197. The music of Rick and Morty, composed primarily by Ryan Elder, frequently incorporates orchestral elements alongside synthesizer textures in a way that elevates the emotional content of key scenes beyond what the animation alone could achieve. The score for the Season 2 finale, Yapdan, as Rick surrenders himself to the Galactic Federation, builds with a grandeur that makes the moment feel genuinely consequential rather than simply dramatic. Elder's work is one of the most consistently excellent elements of the show's craft. Secret number 198. The theme music's resemblance to the Doctor Who theme is not accidental. Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland have both cited Doctor Who as an influence on the show's DNA, particularly the concept of a genius who travels through time and space with a companion, experiencing adventures that are frequently comic and occasionally devastating. The theme's musical family resemblance to Doctor Who is the show's audio acknowledgement of this debt. Secret number 199. Rick's burping speech pattern was partly a practical consideration, as well as a character choice. Recording a voice actor producing realistic, unpredictable burps within normal dialogue creates significant editing challenges because each burp is a unique event that must be timed relative to the surrounding words. The sound design team developed specific techniques for integrating the burps into Rick's dialogue in a way that felt natural and unrehearsed rather than staged. The result is one of the most technically demanding vocal performances in animation. Secret number 200. The clapping scene from the Season 3 episode Total Recall, where Rick calls the family to attention by clapping slowly and giving a speech. Ish was partly improvised by Roiland in the recording booth, and partly the result of the writers identifying that the episode needed a moment of Rick taking genuine command of the situation in a way that was both authoritative and slightly absurd. The combination of slow clapping and earnest speech-giving worked as a formal joke about movie cliches while also being genuinely effective within the scene's emotional logic. Section 10, The Final Mysteries. Fan theories, continuity details, and open questions. The night has settled fully now. We are at the edge of what is known, looking out at what remains unknown. These last secrets are the ones that have no definitive answer, the questions the show is still asking. Secret number 201. Now, the identity of which Beth is the original and which is the clone remains officially unresolved. Rick told both Beths that he genuinely does not know. Subsequent material and commentary from creators suggests this may not be entirely true. Various details scattered across Seasons 6 and 7 have been interpreted by fans as pointing in one direction or the other, but nothing definitive has been confirmed. The show appears to have decided that the ambiguity is more valuable than the resolution. Secret number 202. Jerry's hidden photograph of Doofus Rick, the one gentle and non-mocking Rick he ever encountered, is still in the garage in a frame he keeps concealed from the rest of the family. This was established as an Easter egg in Season 3 and has not been referenced in the main narrative since. Jerry treasures the memory of a Rick who was kind to him, who engaged with him as a person rather than a punchline, and keeps that memory physically present but hidden, unable to share it without inviting mockery. Secret number 203. The Gravity Falls crossover connection remains one of the show's most carefully constructed pieces of inter-show world building. Alex Hirsch and Justin Roiland apparently had plans for a more formal crossover that was never realized. The specific items passing through portals, Stan's notebook, pen, and mug with a question mark, are too precise to be accidental. The crossover they planned would have established both shows as inhabiting the same multiverse, with travel between them possible but rare. That crossover remains unfinished business in the history of animated television. Secret number 204. The question of what happened to the original Morty from Dimension C-137, the one who was with his Rick before Rick C. 137 settled there, has been addressed only obliquely. Season 6 establishes that the original C-137 Morty died, presumably during the Cronenberg events of Season 1. But the exact nature of his death, his relationship with the original Rick, and the specifics of how Rick C-137 came to occupy that family's household all remain incompletely explored. Secret number 205. Rick's relationship to the Galactic Federation and its history is significantly more complicated than the show has fully explained. He fought against the Federation in a resistance movement with Bird Person and Squanchy. He has at various points been wanted by the Federation, imprisoned by it, as it effectively destroyed it from within. His motivations for this sustained antagonism with galactic authority go back further than the show has depicted, and the full story of what Rick did and why during the Resistance period remains one of the show's most significant untold backstories. Secret number 206. The Season 8 finale post-credit scene involving Space Beth and Amy's research team watching Mr. Poopy Butthole has been analyzed by fans as potentially introducing a new arc involving alternate realities and the monitoring of characters without their knowledge. If Amy's team is systematically observing interdimensional versions of people, the implications for the show's mythology are significant. This may be set up for Season 9's major storyline, Secret number 207. Thus, the recurring presence of ice cream in Rick's emotional memories and backstory has become the subject of a fan theory that ice cream is somehow the meaning of life within the Rick and Morty universe. There are enough moments where ice cream appears in emotionally significant contexts alongside positive memories of Diane, in Rick's most vulnerable confessional moments, that the pattern feels meaningful rather than random. The writers have neither confirmed nor denied that this is intentional. Secret number 208. Rick Prime's stated motivation for killing Diane and Beth was that he was offended by Rick C-137's refusal to abandon his family for the larger adventure of interdimensional travel. But the show has also suggested that Rick Prime may have had a deeper personal reason, possibly that he once had a Diane of his own, and that her loss drove him to remove the attachment from every other Rick, rather than simply accept that he had made a different choice. This would make Rick Prime's atrocity against the multiverse's Dianes not pure narcissism, but a deranged form of grief, which is both more disturbing and more humanly understandable. Secret number 209. Evil Morty's use of the Omega device schematic that he took from Rick Prime's body is one of the show's most significant unresolved setups. He has the ability to erase specific individuals from the entire multiverse. What he intends to do with this capability, and who or what he might erase, is a question that the show has placed in the universe without yet acting on. The most dramatic possibility is that he could erase Ricks from all dimensions, much completing a liberation that his escape through the central finite curve only began. Secret number 210. The question of whether any version of Diane Sanchez can be recovered, now that Rick Prime has used the Omega device to erase her from all dimensions, has been raised by the post-credits scene of the Season 8 finale, where Amy's team appears to be pursuing research related to this possibility. Rick specifically chose not to acquire the Omega device's reversal capability after killing Rick Prime, letting evil Morty take it. Whether this was a deliberate choice or a missed opportunity, and whether the show will address the possibility of Diane's restoration, are among the most emotionally charged open questions in the series. Secret number 211. 2. The Season 9 episode titles leaked in June 2025 include Erickerhead, Jeerbud, Mort Gully, The Last Rick Forest, Rick Days 7 Nights, Rick Few Hustle, Salute Your Morts, See Rick Nitty 2019, and There's Something About Morty. These titles suggest a season that will include at least one film parody involving Morty, a callback to the year the show became a massive cultural phenomenon and an episode focused on Jerry's friendships. The pun title tradition continues with full commitment. Secret number 212. The show has always taken the position that intelligence does not confer wisdom or moral superiority, and that the most intelligent character in the universe is simultaneously one of the most emotionally dysfunctional. This position has been articulated differently across different seasons and storylines, but it has never wavered. Rick is brilliant. Rick is also broken. The show never allows you to use the first fact to dismiss the second. Secret number 213. The fan theory that Mr. Nimbus has been pursuing the same Rick across dimensions using an unknown method of interdimensional travel, rather than simply being the Mr. Nimbus of whatever dimension Rick currently inhabits, is supported by his intimate knowledge of Rick's specific history, including his reference to Diane. If Nimbus has indeed been tracking Rick C-137 specifically across his dimensional migrations, the depth of their rivalry and history is significantly greater than even the show has depicted. Secret number 214. Do the show's treatment of the president as someone who has an adversarial, but ultimately respectful relationship with Rick mirrors many real-world dynamics between national governments and individuals with disruptive technological capabilities. The president needs Rick because Rick can do things that conventional military and intelligence resources cannot. Rick tolerates the president because the president has the authority to make Rick's domestic life either very complicated or relatively simple. Their relationship is transactional, but it contains genuine mutual respect that neither party would easily admit to. Secret number 215. The show has occasionally depicted Rick at his most vulnerable during scenes where he is alone or believes himself unobserved. The moments where Rick talks to his ship's computer, knowing it is a simulation of Diane, carry a different emotional weight from his interactions with family members. He lets his guard down slightly, or lets the guard be a different kind of guard, one that is mourning rather than protecting. These scenes are among the most carefully written in the entire series. Secret number 216. The show established early and has maintained consistently that Morty's brainwaves specifically cancel out Rick's genius signature in a way that protects Rick from detection by his enemies. This is described as the reason Rick travels with a Morty rather than any other companion. But the show has developed enough emotional weight around their relationship that this practical explanation now feels insufficient. Rick chooses to be with Morty not because it is useful, but because it is the closest thing to a family relationship he has allowed himself since losing Diane. Secret number 217. The Butter robot from Season 2, who exists purely to pass butter and, upon learning this, asks in a small, devastated voice what its purpose is, became one of the show's most beloved single-scene characters. Rick's response that its purpose is to pass butter, and that the robot should welcome that certainty rather than mourning it, is Rick expressing his philosophy in its most compressed form. Some of us know what we are here for. Most of us don't. Rick believes he is closer to the butter robot than he likes to admit. Secret number 218. Now, the show has never resolved whether Beth's clone is living a meaningfully better or worse life than her original. Both versions have had significant adventures, significant failures, and significant relationships. The show's implicit argument is that the question of which life is better is the wrong question, and that the right question is whether each version is fully engaged in the life she is living, rather than mourning the life she did not get. Secret number 219. Dan Harmon's story circle, the narrative framework the show uses, describes an 8-step journey that always returns the protagonist to where they began, but changed. Rick ends every season, and indeed every episode, approximately where he began. He is in the garage, he is with Morty. Now, he has not made the sweeping emotional changes that would resolve his damage. But the show argues, through the cumulative weight of small moments across hundreds of episodes, that something is accumulating in him. The circle keeps turning. The person making the circuit is not exactly the same each time around. Secret number 220. The show's own relationship to its audience has been a subject of explicit commentary in multiple episodes, particularly in the meta episodes of seasons 3 and 4. The show is aware that it has a passionate and sometimes demanding fan base. It is aware that expectations have accumulated around it. The various self-aware episodes, the story train, the heist parody, the season 3 premiere that pranked its own audience by releasing unexpectedly, are all expressions of the show's complex feelings about being watched as closely as it is. A show this self-aware cannot escape its awareness. The watchers are always already part of what is being watched. Secret number 221. The Council of Ricks, which governed the Citadel before Evil Morty's election, was structured so that no individual Rick could accumulate disproportionate power. This is both a response to the natural anarchism of Rick's personality and a commentary on governance. The Ricks correctly identified that the greatest threat to their collective was their individual members. The safeguards they built were extensive and sophisticated. They did not build any safeguard against a Morty because it genuinely did not occur to them that a Morty was capable of posing a threat. Secret number 222. Rick's characteristic catchphrases, including "Wooba Looba Dub Dub," which Bird Person translates in the show as "I am in great pain, please help me," were invented by Roiland during the improvisational recording sessions of the first season. The translation Bird Person provides retroactively reframes every use of the phrase as a cry for help disguised as nonsense, which is precisely the kind of simultaneously funny and devastating detail the show excels at. Secret number 223. The show's 9th season is set to premiere on May 24, 2026. The production has been ongoing, with the writers' room having begun work on Season 9 before Season 8 even aired. Harmon has described the current era of the show as one of the healthiest it has experienced, with a stable creative team who are deeply invested in the characters and mythology they have inherited and expanded. Secret number 224. The show has maintained its position as one of the most watched programs on Adult Swim throughout its run, even as the media landscape around it has changed dramatically. The specific audience that Rick and Morty developed is unusual for an animated series. It includes a significant proportion of older viewers who engage with the show's philosophical and scientific content, alongside younger viewers who are drawn to its irreverence and spectacle. This dual audience has given the show a longevity that genre-specific animated series often struggle to achieve. Secret number 225. Every version of Rick in the multiverse within the central finite curve shares the same fundamental genius. What distinguishes them is their choices. Rick C-137 chose to stay with his family. Rick Prime chose not to. That choice, which seemed small at the time, determined the entire shape of both their lives across the following decades. The show treats this as its most fundamental moral argument, that the choices you make in ordinary moments accumulate into the person you become. Secret number 226. The show premiered in December of 2013. As of the summer of 2025, it has produced 81 episodes across 8 seasons and has been renewed through season 12. Rick Sanchez is one of the most analyzed fictional characters in contemporary popular culture. Morty Smith has become a cultural shorthand for a specific kind of reluctant courage. The show has generated academic papers, philosophy courses, science education initiatives, and one of the most dedicated and analytical fan communities in animation. Secret number 227. The Rick and Morty anime series, Rick and Morty, the anime, which premiered in Japan and internationally in 2024, exists as a parallel project developed with Japanese animation studios. It adapts and extends the show's universe in ways that the Western series has not pursued, including storylines set during periods of Rick's backstory that the original show has only referenced. It is canon in the sense that it was officially sanctioned, but its relationship to the main series continuity is deliberately kept somewhat flexible. Secret number 228. As the show has been cited by multiple real scientists as a useful educational tool for introducing quantum mechanics, multiverse theory, and philosophical questions about consciousness to general audiences. It is one of the very few works of popular entertainment that has been specifically commended by working physicists for engaging seriously, if imperfectly, with real science. This was not an explicit goal of the show's creation, but has become one of its most unexpected legacies. Secret number 229. The show's treatment of mental health, particularly Rick's alcoholism, his depression, and his avoidance of therapy, has been discussed in clinical contexts. Doctor. Wang's speech in Pickle Rick is sometimes taught in psychology courses as an unusually clear dramatization of the relationship between high intelligence and emotional avoidance, specifically the way that cognitive capability can be weaponized against genuine vulnerability. A fictional character's psychology is being used to help real people understand real psychological dynamics. Secret number 230. The show has influenced a generation of animated storytelling that has followed it. The combination of genuine scientific engagement, serialized emotional depth, and extreme tonal range that Rick and Morty pioneered has become a template that numerous subsequent animated series have attempted to follow. None have fully replicated it, partly because the specific combination of Harmon's structural sensibility and the show's improvisational energy is difficult to reproduce, and partly because the show arrived at a specific cultural moment that cannot be manufactured. Secret number 231. The phrase, "nothing is what it seems," which could serve as the show's unofficial motto, runs through every level of Rick and Morty's storytelling. Characters who appear stupid turn out to be capable. Characters who appear powerful turn out to be fragile. Adventures that begin as comedies end as meditations on grief. Episodes that appear to be about science fiction concepts turn out to be about family. The universe that appears to be cold and meaningless produces, within that coldness, moments of genuine connection and love that the coldness cannot fully extinguish. Secret number 232. Rick's portal gun requires a specific fluid whose composition changes across the show's history. Early episodes suggest that portal fluid can be produced by Rick alone, through a process that involves his specific genius. Later seasons imply that the formula is more widely known, but that the precise composition of Rick C-137's portal fluid is unique to him, tied to his specific interdimensional history. This detail supports the idea that the central finite curve was created using Rick C-137's specific formula, making him its architect whether he intended it or not. Secret number 233. The show has never definitively established whether the events depicted in it constitute the full scope of Rick and Morty's adventures, or a selected sample. Various throwaway lines suggest that Rick and Morty have been on hundreds or thousands of adventures, most of which the audience has never seen. The adventures depicted in the show may be a cherry-picked selection of the most narratively interesting moments in a much longer and more complicated history. This suggests that the show is, in some sense, already a compression, a highlight reel from an infinite archive. Secret number 234. The show has occasionally depicted moments of genuine joy. The sequences in Rick's Minutes where Rick and Morty watch interdimensional television and simply laugh together. The brief moments of genuine warmth between Rick and Morty after a successful adventure. The occasional dinner scene where the family sits together without crisis. These moments are rare and brief, which makes them feel precious. The show earns the joy by surrounding it with difficulty. Secret number 235. Rick's tendency to dismiss sentimentality is consistently presented alongside evidence that he is profoundly sentimental. He keeps a simulation of his dead wife in his home dimension. He maintains relationships across decades with characters like Bird Person, despite pushing everyone away. He chose to settle with a family that needed him, rather than continuing his search for the Rick who killed his original family. His actions systematically contradict his stated philosophy, and the show presents this contradiction not as hypocrisy, but as the most honest thing about him. Secret number 236. The show has established, through its treatment of the Citadel, the Galactic Federation, and various other institutions, a consistent political philosophy. That power concentrated in institutions inevitably becomes self-serving, that the most elaborate justifications for authority are often the most suspect, and that the individual conscience remains more reliable than institutional morality. This philosophy is expressed through comedy rather than manifesto, but it is consistent and deliberate. Secret number 237. One of the most overlooked recurring details in the show is the way characters remember each other, across dimensional shifts. When Rick moves to a new dimension, he is a stranger to that dimension's version of his family. They have memories of a Rick who is not him. Over time, that's the memories they form of Rick C-137 overwrite or coexist with those earlier memories in ways the show has never fully explored. The family Rick lives with has, in a sense, been slowly replacing their biological Rick with someone from another dimension, without knowing it. Secret number 238. The theme of chosen family versus biological family runs throughout the series. Rick chose this family. The family has, over time, chosen him back, not without complications. Morty has chosen to stay with Rick through circumstances that would have ended most relationships. Beth has chosen repeatedly to accept the cost of having Rick around. Jerry has chosen to stay with Beth, and therefore with Rick. Summer has chosen to push her way into the adventures rather than staying behind. Every member of this family is there because of choices made across years, and those choices have accumulated into something that resembles love, even when it does not look like it. Secret number 239. The post-credits scene of the Season 8 finale, which introduces the possibility of Amy's research team monitoring Mr. Poopy Butthole and potentially researching interdimensional alternatives to him or other characters, may be the seed of a Season 9 storyline that explores what happens when ordinary people in the Rick and Morty universe become aware of the multiverse and attempt to navigate it without Rick's capabilities or knowledge. This would represent a significant expansion of the show's perspective beyond the Smith family. Secret number 240. The show has expressed, through multiple storylines and character moments, the idea that intelligence without wisdom is not an advantage but a form of suffering. Rick is the most intelligent being in his universe and also one of the most miserable. The Ricks of the Citadel are uniformly brilliant and uniformly unable to form genuine relationships with each other. Evil Morty's intelligence liberated him from the Citadel but left him alone in unknown space with no apparent purpose. The show consistently suggests that what makes life livable is not cognitive ability, but emotional connection, which is the one thing Rick has spent his entire life avoiding. Secret number 241. The character of Aberdolf Linkler, the genetic combination of Lincoln and history's most notorious fascist dictator, but was designed to be a specific kind of tragic figure, someone whose identity is so internally contradictory that coherent action is nearly impossible. He wants to be good, in the Lincoln sense. He is capable of great evil, in the other sense. He never resolves this contradiction and is last seen being consumed by a tentacled creature after a brief, confused career as a failed party host. He returns as a vision in the Season 4 meta episode, briefly, as another unfulfilled narrative possibility. Secret number 242. The show has used the concept of the multiverse to make a specific argument about personal responsibility. In an infinite multiverse, there is always a version of you who made the better choice, the kinder decision, the braver action. Rick knows this. He has seen versions of himself who are better people. The existence of better versions does not exonerate the worse version. You are accountable for the choices you made, not for the choices your other selves made in branches you will never visit. Secret number 243. The Smith family house, which has served as the show's primary domestic setting since the first episode, is itself a kind of character. It has accumulated damage, scars, and alterations across 8 seasons that are recorded in the background art. It has been teleported to an alien planet, attacked by parasites, invaded by alternate dimension threats, and repaired imperfectly over and over again. It is a house that carries its history visibly, which mirrors the family that lives inside it. Secret number 244. But the show has been described by critics as a show that uses nihilism to argue against nihilism, staging the full case for meaninglessness in order to find, within that staging, reasons to care anyway. Rick articulates the nihilist position with genuine eloquence and apparent conviction. The show then proceeds to undermine that position not through explicit refutation, but through action. Rick acts as though things matter. Morty fights for what he loves. Mr. Poopy Butthole keeps being kind. The universe is cold, and the characters refuse to be. Secret number 245. The Meeseeks episode, which appears early in Season 1, contains a philosophical meditation that is easy to miss beneath the slapstick surface. The Meeseeks exist only to serve, and existence is pain for them. But Jerry's failure to improve his golf game extends that existence past its intended duration, producing suffering that escalates into violence. The episode is asking, what does it mean to create a being whose entire purpose is service? What obligation do you have to that being? Rick created them. They are suffering because of his creation. He is already doing what he accuses the universe of doing to everyone. Secret number 246. The show has maintained, across all 8 seasons, and through all the changes in its creative team, a fundamental commitment to the emotional authenticity of its characters. Rick is not a metaphor for nihilism. He is a specific person with a specific history who has arrived at nihilism as a defense mechanism. Morty is not a metaphor for innocence or moral purity, but he is a specific teenager with specific fears who is trying to become a specific kind of person despite specific obstacles. The specificity is what makes the characters feel real, and the show has never sacrificed that specificity for the sake of a broader point. Secret number 247. The connection between the two shows that influenced Rick and Morty most directly, The Simpsons and Futurama, has been acknowledged in multiple episodes through visual Easter eggs and verbal references. The show respects its influences enough to cite them, while also being sufficiently distinct from them that the citations feel like affection rather than imitation. Rick and Morty is not a better version of either of those shows. It is something adjacent to both of them that could only have been made by people who grew up watching both. Secret number 248. Every episode of Rick and Morty ends with the show resetting to approximately where it began. The garage, the family, the unremarkable suburban house sitting on top of an infinite universe. This reset is both a structural choice and a statement of values. No matter how far Rick and Morty travel, no matter how many dimensions they visit, how many civilizations they encounter, how many versions of themselves they meet, they return. Something pulls them back. The show argues very quietly in that return that belonging is not a trap but a choice, and that choosing it repeatedly across infinite alternatives is what makes it real. Secret number 249. Dan Harmon has said that the show will end when there is no more story to tell and not before. Rick and Morty has been renewed through Season 12. The story is not finished. There are more adventures to run, more secrets to hide in backgrounds that reward careful attention, more moments of unexpected tenderness in the middle of interdimensional chaos. The garage door will keep opening, the green portal will keep glowing, and somewhere out there in one of the infinite branches of reality, every version of this story continues simultaneously, all of them running to their own conclusion at their own pace in their own dimension, with their own version of a brilliant broken man and the nervous kid who keeps choosing to go with him anyway. Secret number 250. And the last secret, the one that holds all the others together. Last is this. Rick and Morty is a show about the space between who we are and who we could have been. Rick is haunted by it. Morty is growing into it. Beth is negotiating with it. Jerry is stubbornly ignoring it. Summer is fighting for it. Every character carries the ghost of an alternate self, a different choice, a different outcome, a different version running in parallel in some dimension they will never visit. The show takes that haunting seriously. It treats the gap between who you are and who you might have been not as a source of shame, but as a source of information. The gap tells you what you value. It tells you what you gave up to be here. And being here imperfect and present in whatever dimension you ended up in turns out to be the adventure. Sleep well. The portal gun is on the workbench. The garage light is on. And somewhere, in an infinite number of realities, the story is still going.